in a union. Power, there is power in our hands. Power, we stand and fight together. There is power in a union on many lands. Power, come and reach across the borders. Power, come and open up your eyes. Power, we stand and fight together. Power when we organize. Power, we stand and fight together. There's power when we organize. Power, when we stand and fight together. There is power when we organize.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. Verizon is demanding concessions from its 39,000 CWA and IBEW union workers, despite revenue of $127 billion and projected profit this year of $9.6 billion. IBEW Local 2222's Miles Calvey says a strike has been authorized, with one more week of bargaining to go before the current contract expires.
What we're looking for is to maintain job security. We definitely understand some of the issues going forward with healthcare, but we need improvements on the pension. We don't need an elimination of the pension.
Verizon workers rallied in New York City over the weekend and will rally again in Boston Thursday. The unions say company demands include contracting out union work, shifting more healthcare costs onto workers, cutting pensions, and abandoning expansion of FiOS. The union wants expansion of FiOS, Verizon's bundled fiber optic internet, TV, and phone service. CWA Vice President Dennis Traynor says at the bargaining table so far, Verizon's only interest has been to try to screw its workers. 13 fired workers ordered reinstated by the NLRB at Terex in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, are still waiting to get their jobs back. The Labor Board ruled that Terex, also known as ASV Inc., illegally fired the workers for union activity. The NLRB ordered the company to take the workers back and to recognize and bargain with the Boilermakers Union. The NLRB decision said Terex ASV illegally threatened to close the plant, made coercive statements, interrogated workers, and finally fired 13 of them for supporting the union. The company is appealing that decision. Mike Casso is one of the fired pro-union workers.
Just because we're working class people, we're not stupid. We're not going to lay down and play dead to the CEOs of these big companies. We didn't start this whole thing for a big pay raise. We started because, these guys are basically raping us. Every time we turned around, they were taking benefits away from us.
Casso says he's angry at the illegal treatment he's getting from Terex ASV, and he says the company did nothing when an anti-union worker threatened pro-union workers with violence.
I was basically pissed. I ain't gonna lie. They tried to insult my intelligence. You got to expect it coming from a multi-million-dollar global business. They're going to try and push the little guy around, and this is what this was all about, is being treated fair, and it wasn't happening. We had a worker that walked up to a co-worker and told him, "You vote yes for this union. Oh, I know where you live. I'll burn you out of your house. I'll burn your house down." This individual went to our boss and told him, "Hey, this is what's going on." The guy never even thought twice about coming down on the floor. He ignored the whole situation.
Workers Independent News is brought to you by the American Federation of Teachers and its 1.6 million members working to reclaim the promise of public education, health care, and public services for our students, their families, and our communities. More information online at aft.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead. Make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
This town gonna be here long after I'm gone. East side, west side, people don't surrender. The thing down, but they still rock on. Oh, and this town is my town. Alright, you're the hater.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here today on the big program. Lots of things to get to, lots to talk about. Crumbling roads, crumbling bridges, and a Congress in gridlock. Appears something might happen in the Senate, but the House, not so much. We'll talk about that and what it means to the certainty of the construction industry during the construction season. There's some say, well, we'll pass a couple of month extension, we'll do a quick little hit, and then we'll go on vacation. What's that going to mean for the certainty of projects to come? We'll talk a little bit about that. Also, the minimum wage stuff, that's a big thing in my view. Something that needs to be addressed, and right now we'll get to a bunch about that. We'll also talk about the environment. I know how everyone loves that. We love to breathe the clean air, drink the clean water. Or maybe not. We like sludge in our water. I go back to when I was a kid, the brown air and the water that you could cut with a knife. There you go. That's what we want. The acid rain. I was talking to a kid the other day, had never heard the term acid rain. You know why he has never heard the term acid rain? Because he wasn't born yet when we had it. And through policy, smart policy, going, yeah, we can do this, we actually stopped that whole little phenomenon, which means that we can't change things. We'll talk a little bit about that. So much to get to. All of the presidential cavalcade of crazy on the right. They're pitching and pandering to the working class of the country because, they care. With their tax cuts for the rich and deregulation for business. They do. They care. They really do. The rhetoric is wonderful. We care. We love our workers. We do, especially when they clean up after us and cook for us and clean for us and do all of our stuff for us and make our money for us so that we can have more. Yeah, we'll talk about that. Cannot wait. Your thoughts, your questions, your comments, whatever's on your mind. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-888-520-7425. That's 1-888-520-RICK. So, the big news, the big story that I saw across my desk this morning, Hillary is moving on the minimum wage, actually came out in favor of the New York City of New York backing a $15 an hour wage for fast food workers. Wow. Hasn't taken a position on the federal level, but there's a bunch of people saying this is going to divide the Democrats because in the country, we need to have, if you've got crazy in the Republican side of the equation where they're basically tearing at each other, which is fun to watch, you need to create that on the other side. You need to create, there's a division that's ripping the Democratic Party apart. They're fighting over the minimum wage, and could it bring them down? I love that. It's beautiful. It's fantastic. Creates that horse race, that energy. Great. The problem is I don't know that it's really tearing at the Democratic Party. I think they're all heading in the right direction. Because if you remember, now think back with me. Go back in the Wayback Machine. Come with me. You go back to the State of the Union address a couple years ago that the president gave, said he wanted to see the minimum wage go all the way up to a whopping $9 an hour. And I remember going at the time and go, what good's that? It's okay, it's a little bump, great. That's okay. But that's not bold, that's not beefy, that's not chunky. What we need is a real push, a big increase, and a tying to inflation so that we don't have to have an entire presidency where it doesn't go up. That seems rational, seems reasonable, and immediately everyone's like, $9 an hour. What? Okay. Then this whole movement started. This whole group of fast food workers, the fast forward people, the retail workers started going, hey, we want better lives. We want a piece of the pie. We want some of the wealth that we create. And you're seeing the low-wage workforce in this country. And I'm telling you why. The reality is the Tea Party has caused this. This is one of those things that I guess you could blame on the Tea Party if you want to. So my Tea Party friends, good for you. You have caused a movement of low-waged workers to say, you know what, the hell with this. We want a decent wage and we want a union. And congratulations, Tea Party folks. I think this could be that spark that regenerates the labor movement. That spark that goes, working people go, oh, wait a second, I have been getting screwed. And for way too long, and damn it, it's going to stop. And you go, but Rick, how did the Tea Party do this? Simple. The Tea Party did it by all of the subsidies that the low-wage workforce has been given to be quiet, kind of the hush money, if you will. The Tea Party wanted to go after. Saying, look at those lazy people getting food stamps. Look at those lazy people getting housing assistance. Look at those lazy people getting Medicaid. I don't get that. They shouldn't get it. So what you got are these people who are going, I was able to make it. I was able to get by till tomorrow. I was able to put food on the table for the kids and put a roof over their heads, some clothes on their back. Granted, I had to go begging from different charitable groups and from the government to give us some help, but I'm getting by. I'm working the crappy job. I'm working for crummy wages. I'm able to put a little something on the table. I'm getting by. So then the T-twits come around and go, oh, they don't deserve that. And you got all these T-twit politicians going, yes, we need to cut them and make them get a job. You got Mitt Romney going, the 47% who don't pay federal taxes, they're the problem. Well, now what you got are these people who are, quote unquote, the problem, saying, BS, we're not the problem. And we want a raise. And $15 an hour and a union was their call. And what's interesting to me is almost immediately Obama came off the $9. Went up to $9.50, if you remember. Come with me with this. Back to the machine. Went up to $9.50, then it was $10.10. Now it's all the way up to $12. So you got Obama now saying, no, $12. Yeah, okay, fine. This is what's known as negotiating. Let me let my Democratic friends in on this. Come with me, if you will, to what is known as the bargaining table. I know we haven't been there for a while, so maybe here's the lesson on how this happens. Okay, just a thought. Okay, come with me. You never start off in your negotiation on what you're willing to accept. Never, ever, not even clinically. Doesn't happen. You'll never see someone come and go, okay, I would like to have this, and then get it. Never happens. You always, and this is what the right wing really gets. This is what the business community really gets. We start off way over here, and then we work our way back like we're giving something up. So you started off at $15 an hour. Immediately, Obama moves off 9 to 9.50 to 10, to 10.10, then now to 12. And now you're moving the entire party structure. You're moving all the politicians. You're moving them in that direction because you're giving them the cover to go, this is what the people want. We're doing what our constituents want. This is what's known as lobbying. Something that we used to, as a people, used to get. We didn't hire people that did it. We did it ourselves, because we would talk to our politician and we'd go, hey, Mr. Representative man guy or woman girl, why aren't you doing this? Why are the potholes still here? Why are my kids' schools underfunded? Why is huge chunks of concrete coming off of the bridges? Why am I not earning a decent wage? Why is it that the minimum wage hasn't been raised since 2009? Why is that? Well, it's because I'm more interested in giving tax breaks to corporations and tax cuts to wealthy people. And you know what used to happen? We used to get ticked off at that. We used to be angry. What? Them? Not us? All of us? The voters? This is the amazing part of all this to me. So there's not a rift in the Democratic Party. There's actually what's known as constituents putting pressure on their politicians and them all moving in that direction. Now, there are degrees. Will Hillary come out as Bernie has and says $15 an hour is right? Will she be pushed that far? Will Martin O'Malley and his serenading and singing, the Woody Guthrie song, will that help? I think that'll make him a great vice president, by the way. I think him and his guitar and the troubadour thing, banging. I think that's a good thing for the VP. Nice sideshow, could do the good deal. Not so much for the big job. I don't think he was that good. Couldn't blow the sax like Bill. But, at the end of it, this is the whole clan. This is the whole party going, okay, we're on the side of workers. And boy, what a great, great place that would be for the Democratic Party, don't you think? Because the Republicans are trying. You've got the GOP who's throwing out the rhetoric. Oh, we care. We care. We care about you and your kids, yeah. Just long enough for you to vote for us. Yeah, there you go. So we're gonna focus a little bit on that. I think this is great, and it's a good place for the Democratic Party to be, in my view. So it'll be one of those things that we're going to get to, because understand, people want the minimum wage increased. If you remember last year, New York Times, CBS had a poll. 71% of the nation backed an increase to at least $10.10 an hour. 71% of the nation. That's huge. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
The Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1913. Silk workers in Paterson, New Jersey ended their unsuccessful 6-month strike. By 1900, Paterson had won the nickname Silk City. Skilled weavers, ribbon weavers in particular, were proud of their craft. They were tenacious in fighting for the respect and decent wages they thought they deserved. Earlier that spring, these skilled ribbon weavers united all of the silk workers and went on strike. The strikers' main demand was a call for the 8-hour workday. The strikers were aided by members of the industrial workers of the world, most notably Big Bill Haywood and Elizabeth Gurley Flynn. The strike also drew attention from intellectuals in Greenwich Village in New York. In fact, some time after the strike started, many of the Greenwich villagers came to Paterson to observe the strike firsthand. They were impressed by the solidarity among the many nationalities of the silk workers and the courage of the strikers. The strike spread to other towns in New Jersey, as well as Pennsylvania, New York, and Connecticut. Meanwhile, by May, the Greenwich villagers were working on what they called the Paterson Pageant. They hoped to bring public attention to the workers' struggles by staging a dramatic performance of the strike. On June 7th, Madison Square Garden was overflowing with 15,000 audience members, and more filling the standing room only. Yet, while the Paterson Pageant did bring money into the strike fund, this was not enough to help all of the workers on strike. Finally, the strikers returned to work. They were able to get a 9-hour workday at most job sites, but the elusive quest for the 8-hour day remained incomplete. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
Minimum wage!
You know what it means when they pay you minimum wage? You know what they're trying to tell you is like, hey, if I could pay you less, I would.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. What's interesting about the numbers that I threw out, 71% of the folks in this country are in favor of raising the minimum wage up to $10.10 an hour. That number jumps even higher when you're looking at maybe $9 or $9.50, and which is why I think even the Republicans are saying we need to raise the minimum wage. Rick Santorum, who is running for president, there are two Republicans who are running for president, Ben Carson being the other, who do support raising the minimum wage, but they support an idea of raising it 50 cents an hour, a whopping 50 cents an hour each of the next 3 years, which I got to be honest, nowhere close to even near enough. Kind of goes right in line with Senator Scott Wagner and his proposal that, as I said, I think it's just to get the issue off the table. But here to talk about why we need to be raising the minimum wage, especially for women, I have asked Carol Tracy. She's the executive director over at the Women's Law Project to come talk with us. Carol, thanks for taking time for us.
Glad to.
So, I look at this, and there's some pressure on both sides to get the minimum wage increased. There are just folks on both sides saying, well, we'll give you a little bit, whereas I think there's a push on the Democratic side for $15 an hour in a union.
Absolutely. And, the reality is the current minimum wage just kills the economy. People are paid so little that they can't buy the things they need. And, that has a rolling effect on the economy. Minimum wage workers in Pennsylvania, nearly 3/4 of whom are women, can't support themselves and their families on earnings of just $7.25 per hour, or the terrible tipped minimum cash wage of $2.83. It's absurd. It's killing the economy. It makes no sense, and it's punitive and short-sighted.
Do you think, given the statistics you just threw out there, that the majority of people who are earning minimum wage are women? Do you think this is a gender issue, which is why it doesn't get the same kind of attention as it may if the numbers were flipped?
Oh, there's no question about that. There's no question in my mind about that. That people think that women work for pin money. They don't understand the numbers of women who are the sole support of their families, or even in two-parent families, that many of the or most of high-wage blue-collar jobs that men once had disappeared. So in two-parent families, both have to be working, yep. And in a single family, the basic elements of life people cannot afford to buy on an annual salary of $14,500 a year.
What do you say to the business owner who says, we just can't afford it? I mean, it'd be nice to raise the minimum wage, but we've set up our business model on we're gonna take money from the taxpayers to subsidize low-wage workers, and this has been working well for us. Why change it now?
Well, they don't know what they're talking about, because the research suggests that raising the minimum wage doesn't hurt job growth, and that employers can afford to pay higher wages, given that corporate profits are at a record high, while the share of revenues going to workers are at a record low. I mean, it's a handful of people, the stockholders, who are making the money, the corporate profits, and the workers aren't. They certainly can afford to do it, and it will boost the economy. I mean, what we've known since the recession in 2008 is that as we've gotten jobs back, there's still too many low-wage jobs. So the economy, though improving, is still stagnating in a lot of areas. And one of the ways to boost the economy for all of us is to increase the minimum wage. It's just, it makes economic sense across the board. And it's both, I think there are some small business owners, frankly, who don't understand the economy themselves, and the big business owners who are just plain greedy.
Yeah, well, I think they perfectly understand it. It's more for them. But I look at this, and I've recently given the Tea Party credit for this push to raise the minimum wage, because and I have kind of a twisted way of looking at this. For a while, folks were okay making poverty wages because they were getting some subsidies, rent assistance, food stamps, school lunch programs, all of that stuff. Didn't really like it, but they were getting it. And weren't being abused for getting it. The Tea Party comes around in late 2010, and now those are the lazy people who are destroying the economy. They're stealing from us, and people are going, wait a minute, I'm working my behind off. You had Mitt Romney go, 47% of those lazy people don't pay taxes, and you got people who are going, wait a minute, I work every day. And I think there's part of me that goes, I've had enough already. This is that moment where you go, you know what? Now we've got to fight for better wages, hours, and conditions.
Yeah, I think that the populace understands that, and I think that there's clearly a real movement throughout the United States for basically for basic fairness in a lot of arenas. And this, you know, it's what they say. It's the economy, stupid.
Yep.
It's the issue that's going to drive public discourse and certainly electoral politics in the presidential year.
Now, there are those who are saying that if we just raise this up to like $10.10 an hour, in fact, I think it's the Keystone Research Center that estimated that if we just upped it to $10.10 by 2016, that could affect somewhere around 1.2 million workers in this Commonwealth alone, let alone the entire nation. What if we went to $12 or even the 15 call that some are? You know, what kind of increase in economic activity could you get? Because look, our economy, like it or not, is a consumer-based economy. If consumers don't have any money, they're not buying anything.
That's right, and that's exactly the point, and that's the point that just makes clear economic sense, particularly when the basic necessities can't be purchased on $14,500 a year. Then once that is increased to $20,000, that isn't. Sadly, that's not going to go into savings accounts. That's going to go into the economy.
What, they're not
People are going to. It has to, because you know we know what it costs to go to the grocery store.
Yeah.
We know what detergent costs, what diapers cost. I mean, it's just the lack of keeping the minimum wage anywhere close to what the economic issues are in this country has just been absurd, and it's hurt the economy.
How much do you think the falling back of the minimum wage is indicative of labor's falling strength? That the labor unions aren't as strong as they once were to raise wages for all workers. Thus, the low wage worker kind of falls behind.
Well, I think it's certainly related to it, and I think we've had this right wing that has been producing propaganda that. When you talk about the Tea Party, we know that a lot of members of the Tea Party themselves were low-income people, and they were working against their own economic self-interest because they have absorbed the propaganda about everybody living off the government, which is, it certainly benefited the Koch brothers, but it's not even benefiting a lot of the people who affiliated themselves with the Tea Party. Yeah. They didn't, it's been, a concerted effort for 30 years to get the grassroots in the United States to vote against its own economic interest.
And it's amazing to me. I remember going to some of the early Tea Party rallies, and you see the people going, "We need to cut welfare programs. We need to cut those people." I go, "Why are you here? It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon." Well, we lost our jobs. We're on unemployment. Then we're on the unemployment extension. I'm going, but you're part of what you're talking about.
Sure, the same ones who said, get the government out of my Medicare.
Yeah, another beautiful moment in Tea Party history. But, I look at this, and the other shameful part of it is, my wife and I, we go out to dinner occasionally, and the waitresses and waiters who do a fantastic job, most people, I don't think, know that there's a separate wage for those folks. I think it's like, what, $2.85, $2.83 an hour?
$2.83 in Pennsylvania. Yeah, I think that's among the most shocking. I really do. And I've considered myself a pretty well-informed person, and I didn't know that it stayed that low. I had no idea. And we know how hard waiters and waitresses work. It's just plain unfair, right. And it's greedy, and it doesn't help the overall community.
No, and it's something that we need to pass immediately, and it's going to have to happen on the state level, which is why I encourage folks to call their representatives, call their state senators, and and nicely ask. And then if you have to raise your voice a little bit, I would suggest doing that as well. Maybe write a letter, show up at their office.
And we certainly, with Raise the Wage Pennsylvania and the Pennsylvania Campaign for Women's Health, there's proposed legislation in Pennsylvania that would raise the minimum wage to at least $10.10 and increase the tip minimum wage to at least 70% of the minimum wage. We don't think that's enough, but it's certainly a start in Pennsylvania, and there's legislation out there. All we need to do is get them to pass it.
And where should folks go to get more information on that?
The Pennsylvania, you can come to the Women's Law Project website and the Pennsylvania Agenda for Women's Health website.
All right, we'll make sure we get links at the ricksmithshow.com so folks can participate in that. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Carol Tracy. She's executive director of the Women's Law Project. Again, their website is at our site, thericksmithshow.com, or you could easily just go to their site at womenslawproject.org. Another thing I did want to ask you about, Carol, and we've been seeing a lot of news around Planned Parenthood. And look, to me, this is another one of those scheduled kind of attacks. 2016's around the corner. We need to enrage and infuriate the idiot base. I get it. But, you know, again, another series of highly edited propaganda videos that are getting news attention. Can you walk us through what's going on with this?
Well, I'll try to. There are a group of anti-choice activists that created a fake company, spent 3 years recording conversations with Planned Parenthood employees, trying to entrap them into saying that they profit from selling fetal tissue. And it didn't work. It was a complete, stunning, failed sting operation. Planned Parenthood doesn't profit from selling fetal tissue. They couldn't get them to say it on camera. So instead, they edited 2.5 hours of film into a short clip to try to make that impression. And everybody from factcheck.org at the University of Pennsylvania to the New York Times have debunked the misleading editing. But, you know, we still have these lawmakers running around using this propaganda as yet another excuse to try to defund Planned Parenthood and attack women's access to critical, important health care. You know, it's bizarre to have this fake company led by people connected to a clinic bombing, hawking a doctored video, making false claims about their longtime target of Planned Parenthood. And we know, and the public knows, that Planned Parenthood serves millions of women, giving them basic health care, access to contraception, and cervical screenings, and STI information and testing. And, you know, like 1 in 5 American women have visited a Planned Parenthood for health care.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's a failed sting. It's an ongoing attack. Today's poll, there's a poll that's out today that shows the public gets this. You know, and they're going to keep doing it to try to keep this issue in the news. I think that some of the conservatives don't know what to do with themselves now that it looks like they've lost on all the LGBT issues. So they're, you know, swinging back once again to attack women and to attack women's right to have access to constitutionally entitled health care. I hope these guys get sued. I hope that the California Attorney General will go after them, because it certainly appears that they've violated some wiretapping laws.
And not just sued. I hope some of them end up in jail over it. But, you know, they come out with the group that did this, put out the video from the Center for Medical Progress. And who could be against medical progress? Such a nice name, such a lovely sounding group.
Yeah, well, you know, I think apart from the fact that it's a complete fake, it's just another one of these attacks on legitimate scientific research. Because, you know, what's been lost in this discussion, what's been totally lost in this, is the importance of fetal tissue research. You know, 640,000 people a year would be dead from polio, according to UNICEF, if it were not for the fetal tissue research that discovered the polio vaccine. It's being used, you know, to try to develop treatments for Parkinson's, for Alzheimer's, you know, for all kinds of other medical issues. There's an incredibly important social good that's connected with that. And of course, it's also for the women who are having abortions. And, you know, the fetal tissue research also comes from spontaneous abortions or miscarriages or stillbirths that hospitals donate fetal tissue. It's regulated. It's not something that's done for profit. to the extent that it's done at Planned Parenthood or anywhere else. In Pennsylvania, it's closely regulated that it's not a profit-making.
Right. But do you think
it's just the costs?
But do you think it comes down to, people are just, they're trying to enrage? It's like the folks on Front Street when I drive into Harrisburg who are standing out on the side of the road with these horrific pictures, just trying to enrage people and get that visceral reaction from them.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt about it. And I think, for them, it has been a losing battle. They are creating they have been able to entice lawmakers to support this kind of investigation and all of the other kinds of targeted regulation of abortion providers and harassment of abortion providers and all, one law after another to try to limit access to abortion. It's well funded, and the public is simply not with it. But the legislators are certainly not, again, operating in the interest of the people they represent.
Yeah, I think you hit it right there on the head when you said it's well funded, because it's about the money. And it's not surprising to me that now is when it drops, because they're trying to make it a campaign issue. It's not surprising that the last 3 years they've been putting this sham of a video together. Not surprising to me at all, because it's not about the issue, it's about the money. And that's just
that's right. And I think this, like many of these attacks, will backfire, because I think it is giving renewed attention to the importance of fetal tissue research as well, something that's just, as I said, being lost in the conversation. And, to make Planned Parenthood this constant target of ire and the dismissal of understanding that so many women need and use Planned Parenthood for a variety of healthcare issues. It's a disgrace. But I'm absolutely convinced the public is just not gonna stand for it. The public will simply not stand for it. We won't let this happen.
I sure hope you're correct, and we will see how this plays out. But at the end of it, to me, it's just about the money, and it doesn't go any further than that. But Carol, I appreciate you taking some time for us, laying out the issues. Thanks so much.
Glad to. Bye.
Great talking with you. Carol Tracy, she's the executive director of the Women's Law Project there, womenslawproject.org, the website. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people from the top.
Man, it's slow. The tip jar's light and the register's low. The bartender don't have much to say. The regular crowd gets thinner each day. Some have maxed out all their credit cards. Some are working 2 jobs and living in cars. Minimum wage won't pay for a roof, won't pay for a drink. If you gotta have proof, just try it yourself, Mr. CEO. See how far $5.15 an hour will go. Take a part-time job at one of your stores. I bet you can't make it here anymore.
I'm still not sure of all the causes and all the science.
Ohio Governor John Kasich jumps into the 2016 race. We'll try to decipher his position on climate change.
One of the things that preceded the failure of the nation-state of Syria and the rise of ISIS was the effect of climate change.
The Democratic presidential candidate Martin O'Malley links global warming to Middle East unrest and ISIS.
If he is saying that, then my use of aerosol hairspray is as bad as beheadings.
And Fox News heads explode. Plus,
right in the middle of this problem, we have fierce opposition and blind inertia.
California Governor Jerry Brown slams climate science deniers.
All of those slams and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comments.
Of course, we've got to be concerned about it, but we shouldn't worship the environment.
No, we should worship a great big, huge, invisible, bearded, floating guy in the sky. Like you, Governor. That makes much more sense. Am I right? This is your Green News Report.
Sucker star.
Okay, Desi Doyen, I suspect you may be breathing a sigh of relief. We have maybe, just maybe, the final major presidential candidate to enter the race this week, which means your yeoman's job of tracking each of their climate change positions over these past many months is almost over.
There are probably a few more that are going to pop up anyway. They're like whack-a-mole.
All right, well, you just keep whacking. What do you have for us today?
Well, first, the 16th Republican has now jumped into the race for the 2016 Republican presidential nomination. Ohio Governor John Kasich announced his bid on Tuesday. Now, as we've said, we've been tracking the climate change positions of all of the official 2016 candidates, and in an interview with the Financial Times just 2 weeks ago, Kasich said he believes climate change is happening, but he's not sure it's time to do anything about it.
We have an obligation to the environment. Of course, we've got to be concerned about it, but we shouldn't worship the environment. And I wouldn't want to create any kind of dramatic economic change of policy, because I'm still not sure, I don't know that anybody is fully sure of all the causes and all the science.
Oh, man. All right, let's unpack that. First, nobody's worshiping the environment. What we're trying to say is, let's keep the planet alive. That's all it is. And the idea that, yeah, we may have to spend a lot of money to save ourselves, given that we have spent so much more money essentially killing ourselves over the past 50, 100 years. And yes, people do know who is responsible. It is man.
And in more recent history, in practice as governor, Kasich rejected federal funding for high-speed rail and rolled back Ohio's wildly successful renewable electricity standard, which had saved Ohioans over $200 million and lowered their electricity rates.
So is it fair to say that John Kasich both pretends to not be a denier and pretends to be a denier?
All at the same time. It's quite a trick.
He's very good.
Right-wing media was in an uproar this week after Democratic presidential candidate and former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley linked historic mega-drought in the Middle East to unrest in the region.
One of the things that preceded the failure of the nation-state of Syria and the rise of ISIS was the effect of climate change and the mega-drought that affected that region, wiped out farmers, drove people to cities, created a humanitarian crisis that created the conditions of extreme poverty that has led now to the rise of ISIL and this extreme violence.
Heads exploded in right-wing media land, figuratively, of course. Here's Fox News host Kennedy.
Oh, that's it. It's the mega drought. Finally, we know. I guess when you mix a rise in temperature with a lack of water, you get an Islamic caliphate.
Of course, don't tell Fox News, but the Pentagon calls global warming a threat multiplier, and multiple studies have found climate change worsened the 2011 drought in Syria and played a role in triggering Syria's civil war.
And we have covered that time and time again on the Green News Report, so I guess they just can't be bothered to do actual research over at Fox News.
Meanwhile, California Governor Jerry Brown blasted the climate change denial industry and their friends in politics and the media for obstructing action on climate change at a two-day climate summit at the Vatican in Rome this week.
We are talking about extinction. We're talking about climate regimes that have not been seen for tens of millions of years, that requires that we react. Right in the middle of this problem, we have fierce opposition and blind inertia. And that opposition is well financed.
And former California governor and action movie star Arnold Schwarzenegger also warned the conference, quote, "I've starred in a lot of science fiction movies, and let me tell you something, climate change is not science fiction."
And that's the guy who used to drive his Hummer around proudly as a denier. People can change. Only question is, will they do it before it's too late? For much more on that story and all of the others we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget, you can download the Green News Report anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes from bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
Just got time to say your prayer.
while you're waiting for the hammer to fall.
So I look at this this video, and I haven't. Look, it's another one of these attack things by a euphemistically named group, the Center for Medical Progress. Who could be against that? Who could be against medical progress? Who could be against let's make things better? So they come out with this heavily edited video where the appearance is, they're haggling over price. And they want you to believe that all this stuff's up for auction and they're making boatloads of cash off of it and they're just immoral and all this stuff. And immediately you go back to the attacks on Acorn. You go back and the original attacks on Planned Parenthood. You go back through all of this insanity and you go, this is the new MO of the far right. This is not about issue-driven anything. It's about, one, outraging, and two, cash, lots of cash. And, I think back to and I hope Carol's right. I hope the American people are repulsed by this. I hope they turn away. I hope they take none of this seriously and go, it's just a couple of idiots pulling off some nonsense during a campaign year to make money. Because if you go back and you look at the Acorn thing to me was huge. They went after them, the voter fraud, and they were doing the fraud for those who bothered to pay attention and for those who bothered to, and I know this is fighting a losing battle because the idiot right-wing base has already got it in their head. They've been trained to when you hear Acorn, you salivate and then you froth at the mouth and Obama bad. That's kind of the response you get from the right-wing. Who has been trained in this. But the reality is the fraud was against Acorn. It wasn't Acorn defrauding or doing anything. It was them being ripped off. And for those who would bother to care to know what the story was, they were paying people to go out and register voters. So you'd go out for the day, and I think they were paying like $50 a day or whatever it is, and you would come back with the voter registrations signed. Well, what some people were doing is they were going to the bar or they were going, to a restaurant. They were hanging out on a street corner, opening up a phone book and just writing people's names down. And they were turning those in. And the Acorn people go, wait a second. What, you got everyone that you signed up, their last name began with A? Really? And since it was a voter registration, they had to turn it in. That is the law. Had to turn it in. But they turned it in. They said, hey, look, we think some of these are bad. You, the elections officials, you, the folks who look over these registrations, why don't you take a look at them and let's see if they're accurate or not. That's your job. You do that. And that's what happened. That was it in a nutshell. And then you had the right wing go, no. They were trying to defraud the voting system, and they were trying to do what we're doing. Because it's exactly what the right wing was doing, and it's always curious to me that someone points the finger and says, "Oh, I know what you're doing." When three, as my mother always said, when you point the finger at somebody, you got three pointing back at you, because they knew they were doing the same thing. So if you could put the stink on them, well, nobody might look at you. Well, some people went to jail over it. But I look at this, and this is the exact same kind of an MO. It's the exact same kind of thing. At least that's my thought on it.
Yeah. I mean, it is, and don't you know we should be calling a congressional hearing on this, right?
No, and this is just giving idiots a platform, and this is what this is solely an attempt to make this a campaign issue when nobody's talking about this.
I also think that this is just an issue to maybe rile up your base to the point where where you have idiots like Mike Terzai and Joe Scarnati calling for a statewide investigation against Planned Parenthood, Pennsylvania, and say now this becomes such an issue with them, even though they know it's fake, that this devolves into the budget debate coming up in August. Like, imagine if they this could possibly be a budget issue now in August because of the out-and-out hoax that this is, and that's the type of stuff that I find to be appalling. I mean, I was listening to something over the weekend, and you had a history of Republicans, the older generation of Bushes were sitting on used to sit on the chairs of Planned Parenthood.
Yep.
Barry Goldwater sat on a chair as was a director of Planned Parenthood.
Well, that was before they did 100% of abortions, and that's all they do. It's a baby-killing machine. When you realize that Planned Parenthood does about 3% of what they do, about 3% of it is abortion. The rest of it is contraception, STI treatment, gynecological stuff that a lot of poor women don't have access to. To me, this is an assault not just on trying to make more money, but also on women's health, which women should be angry about.
Because the one thing that I find what's really amazing about this is, organizations like the Center for Medical Progress,
the Center for Dogs and Puppies, and
the dubiously named Center for Medical Progress and others. These are people who are just anti-sex and period, and that women should bear the child if they have sex. And they're anti-poor women, and they're also anti-sex education. So let's let people, let's not teach people about sex and all that stuff, and let's put them into a situation where they might have to decide to go get an abortion because they had an unwanted pregnancy, or let's stop it before you get to that point of having
an unwanted pregnancy. Now you're talking sense, and why would we want to do that? It's better just to go, ah! That's so much better, so much more entertaining, just people screaming.
I mean, in some of these states in the South, it's illegal to teach sex ed, and they have the highest rates of unwanted teen pregnancies, the highest rates of STDs, all this different stuff going on, and you wonder why.
No, we don't wonder why, because we don't know any better. We don't want to know no more. We don't want to know any better. Don't want to know anything. Just shh, you and your sense. Go back to doing what you were doing.
I'll go back to the computer now.
There you go. Going to take a quick break. Right back. 1-888-520-RICK. 1-888-520-7425. Your thoughts, questions, comments. You can also email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Right back.
Together we will live on forevermore. In this land we have defended from all things dark and cruel. Now we are defenseless.
The Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
While our presidents praise America's magnificent national park system, they're not maintaining them. Bill Clinton, for example, spoke of how lucky he was to have Hot Springs National Park as a childhood playground. Yet he sat idle as that park's natural wonders and facilities deteriorated, and as the Park Service's maintenance backlog soared to $5 billion. Likewise, in his 2000 campaign, a khaki-clad George W. posed in the majestic Cascade Mountain Range. Wailing that parks were, quote, at the breaking point, he vowed to eliminate Clinton's backlog. Instead, he slashed the NPS budget, including a 40% cut for repairs of the very park he had used as a political prop. The maintenance backlog ballooned to nearly $9 billion under his presidency. Ranger George did make one fix, however, a PR fix. Bush operatives instructed park superintendents to make budget cuts, but not to call them cuts. Instead, they were to say that our parks were undergoing, quote, service-level adjustments. Under Obama, who speaks movingly of a childhood Greyhound bus trip with his family to see some of our parks, another 12% has been chopped from the NPS budget, bumping the deferred maintenance bill to a staggering $11.5 billion. To his credit, Obama has proposed a 2016 centennial budget for NPS, mitigating years of destructive underfunding and calling for $1 billion to address the backlog. Good for him, but that still leaves a $10 billion shortfall, and the sour duo of Senator Mitch McConnell and Speaker John Boehner will oppose even that little increase for the maintenance of these invaluable public assets. This is Jim Hightower saying our so-called leaders are literally stripping service out of the National Park Service and assuring that our national treasures will fall into acute disrepair. It's a bipartisan disgrace.
What do the corporate powers from Wall Street to Walmart have in common? They hate the Hightower Lowdown. You can see why at www.hightowerlowdown.org.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
Get rid of the immigrants! Santa Claus is white! Santa Claus is white! I saw it on Fox News! I saw it on Fox News! War on Christmas! War on Christmas! Oh! Oh, yeah! Oh, you're allowed! Liberals hate Christmas!
Oh, I gotta tell you, I love that. It sounds like the campaign season. Sounds like sounds like what you hear on Fox News. Just people, crazy. I love that. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. And I during the break, I was thinking back during that whole Acorn debacle, and then I was, I started thinking about the guy who dressed up like a pimp, the skinny white guy. Like someone's gonna buy that he was Superfly guy. Yeah, imagine nobody really. If you saw the unedited video and then you saw what they put out, and it's the same thing I'm sure with this, there's nobody who bought that he was a pimp. There's just nobody. Nobody in their right mind goes, really, skinny white guy, in the really bad fake fur coat? Really? Not going to happen. And I guess you would have to know at some point that it's all just a sham. And I wonder in this day and age, if anything we see anymore is true coming out of the right wing. It's just one of those things, man.
No, I don't. I actually have a good story, a good Acorn story. Last year I was working with Action United in Philadelphia for about a month as a canvasser,
right,
having people yell at me on the streets when I was trying to raise awareness for public education in Philadelphia.
Why would we want such a thing?
I know, and it was just the verbal abuse was just hilarious. But about one that we went to go grab lunch at the Bellevue, which is the hotel where the Union League is at, and the governor, Edward G. Rendell's office is up, and he's like, well, what's Action United? And my the advisor at the time is like, oh, we're Acorn. We're the people who stole the election for Obama.
That's probably not the best way to start that conversation.
It went south from there. Like he started off by lobbing a nuke. He nuked the conversation right from the point, and the guy just started getting really upset with us. But no, one of the reasons why we have Action United in Pennsylvania was because they were actually really well organized, and Acorn was well organized, and after that they became Action United, and now we have this organization in Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, serving over 60,000 people. They have 60,000 dues-paying members every month.
Yeah, well, I mean, you need that kind of organization, and it's, when they destroyed Acorn, what they were trying really to do, and they knew exactly why they targeted them and what it was about. It was the beginning of that organization of poor people who were saying, enough is enough, and the people who went after them specifically targeted them just to break up that organization so that you can then divide those people and then make them the reason for all of the attacks, and everything that's gone wrong is their fault because of this group. And they did that. There are still people that I talk to who truly believe that Acorn stole the election, that Acorn, is getting billions of dollars of U.S. tax dollars to give out to poor people so that people are beholden to them. And there are people who actually believe Acorn is still, in function. You should read or just think a little bit.
But now the question is, after the whole entire Acorn debacle on these recent videos, people in the masses aren't really going to realize. I mean, you're going to realize.
The masses don't care.
Yeah, they don't care, and they probably would realize that this is just another heavily edited attack on these organizations or institutions. So really, what they're trying to do is just rile up the base to the point where they can actually destroy them.
Yes! You've got it. Congratulations. The light hath cometh on. And that's the point. The point is that if you can continue to divide the poor people, keep them pitted against each other, especially on the race lines, that's even better yet. Because white people will act in really irrational ways if they think that black people are getting something that they're not getting, and then you'll have this insanity going on. And until we figure out how to cross that divide, until we figure out that, we're all in this together, we're going to continue having these idiotic fights.
Yeah, and right before Carol came on the program, the organization, the Center for Medical Progress, released a third video today.
Well, that's the reason I had her on. It's a third heavily edited video that is just kind of nuts.
Yeah.
But, you know, and I guess it comes down to us. Will we buy it? I don't know. We shall see. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
I saw it on Fox News!
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. Verizon is demanding concessions from its 39,000 CWA and IBEW union workers, despite revenue of $127 billion and projected profit this year of $9.6 billion. IBEW Local 2222's Miles Calvey says a strike has been authorized, with one more week of bargaining to go before the current contract expires.
What we're looking for, needless to maintain job security. We definitely understand some of the issues going forward with healthcare, but we need improvements on the pension. We don't need an elimination of the pension.
Verizon workers rallied in New York City over the weekend and will rally again in Boston Thursday. The unions say company demands include contracting out union work, shifting more healthcare costs onto workers, cutting pensions, and abandoning expansion of FiOS. The union wants expansion of FiOS, Verizon's bundled fiber optic internet, TV, and phone service. CWA Vice President Dennis Traynor says at the bargaining table so far, Verizon's only interest has been to try to screw its workers. 13 fired workers ordered reinstated by the NLRB at Terex in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, are still waiting to get their jobs back. The Labor Board ruled that Terex, also known as ASV Inc., illegally fired the workers for union activity. The NLRB ordered the company to take the workers back and to recognize and bargain with the Boilermakers Union. The NLRB decision said Terex ASV illegally threatened to close the plant, made coercive statements, interrogated workers, and finally fired 13 of them for supporting the union. The company is appealing that decision. Mike Casso is one of the fired pro-union workers.
Just because we're working class people, we're not stupid. We're not going to lay down and play dead to the CEOs of these big companies. We didn't start this whole thing for a big pay raise. We started because, these guys are basically raping us. Every time we turned around, they were taking benefits away from us.
Casso says he's angry at the illegal treatment he's getting from Terex ASV, and he says the company did nothing when an anti-union worker threatened pro-union workers with violence.
I was basically pissed. I ain't gonna lie. They tried to insult my intelligence. You got to expect it coming from a multi-million-dollar global business. They're going to try and push the little guy around, and this is what this was all about, is being treated fair, and it wasn't happening. We had a worker that walked up to a co-worker and told him, "You vote yes for this union. Well, I know where you live. I'll burn you out of your house. I'll burn your house down." This individual went to our boss and told him, "Hey, this is what's going on." The guy never even thought twice about coming down on the floor. He ignored the whole situation.
Workers Independent News is brought to you by the American Federation of Teachers and its 1.6 million members working to reclaim the promise of public education, health care, and public services for our students, their families, and our communities. More information online at aft.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
The proud defender of the American dream, Rick Smith.
So Scott Walker has made his way to Philadelphia today, and I got to tell you, I love what the Democratic Party hath done. They sent out an email, mass email. Evidently, Walker can't decide on Pat's King of Steaks or Geno's, so he's going to have both. And I got to tell you, it's not going to be good for him on the road if you can't decide where to have lunch and only have lunch at one place. If you're going to both places, kind of pandering to everyone, kind of makes you wonder. Just like as they point out that Walker can't commit to his position on if evolution's real, or if Obama's a Christian, or if Obama likes the country, or if what Huckabee had to say was inappropriate. I'm not taking stands. You kind of got to wonder though. The other part of this is you look at Wisconsin, And, you know, as I've been saying, his claim to fame is that he took on 100,000 of those terrorists, you know, the working people of his state. He took on those terrorists and he beat them. And you look at their economy, it's kind of in the tank. So what are the Republicans running on? I know they're all pandering for middle-class votes. They're all pandering with, oh, we care about the children. But what are they really doing? Which is why I have asked Anna Chu. She's the Vice President of Policy and Research over at the Center for American Progress Action Fund. She's the co-author of a report, The Middle Class at Risk. That's why we've asked her to come on the program, talk a bit about it. Anna, thanks for taking time for us.
Hi, Rick. Thanks for having me back on again.
It's always great to talk to our friends over at the Center for American Progress. And, you know, I look at this report that you guys have put out, and one number just jumps right out at me. And that's, you guys are saying from 2000 to 2012, the estimated real cost to middle-class security, $10,600 at a time when income growth has been non-existent. So what you're saying, as I understand, is that just for us to exist, to pay our bills, we've needed to make $10,600 a year more, and we haven't.
Yes. I mean, that's really what you're seeing across the board. You see costs, you know, for very basic pillars of the middle class, say college savings for your children, childcare, housing, your retirement nest egg. All of that has gone up, and it's kept going up. But people's everyday wages have largely stayed the same. And so what you're seeing is families across the board are getting more and more squeezed and finding it really harder and harder to get by, to pay their bills, to really just afford everyday things that they used to be able to afford before.
Yeah, you know, I think like a lot of people, and I'll add myself into this. I worry that my kids are not going to have the opportunities that I have. I worry that their economic prospects are going to be much more diminished than mine were, and I worry about that.
Rick, you're not alone. So obviously, you know, we're a think tank. We did these numbers. We see that the cost of middle-class security has gone up $10,000. But poll after poll is saying that Americans are feeling this at home. They're feeling this at the kitchen table. And that more and more we fear that exactly what you're saying, that our kids won't have a better life, that we will no longer be able to be in the middle class, that our kids won't be in the middle class anymore. And so you see all this happening. You see it happen in the numbers. You see it happening in the polls. And I think finally we're getting to a stage where I think the Republicans might be catching on to how difficult things actually are for American middle-class families.
Right. Because we hear a lot of the presidential candidates on the right wing talking about income, about, you know, we need to raise the minimum wage a little bit. I mean, there's Santorum, there's Ben Carson saying, hey, we're 50 cents an hour for the next couple of years, which will do absolutely nothing to close the gap of income inequality, just so folks know. But you do hear a lot of pandering about, oh, we understand, or as the Bill Clinton frame, we feel your pain.
Oh, my gosh, the amount of pandering you see. I mean, you know, in the time that they're able to actually surface from attacking Trump and being a part of that circus, but, you know, outside of that, you do see them really change their language and really dress up, you know, what they're saying more to try to cater to working families. I mean, you have Rand Paul, when he announced, he talked about how Martin Luther King spoke of two Americas. I mean, that's pretty much like John Edwards.
Yeah.
But when did Rand Paul become our John Edwards?
If that's the case, if the Republican Party has moved that far,
Exactly. So I think that's the thing. They're changing what they're saying. They're changing, you know, how they're selling it. But they're trying to sell you the same thing. They're just repackaging it now. And it's just, you know, the same old wine, but it's just a new bottle.
Right. I mean, they're doing the rebranding thing, and I give them credit for trying. I mean, at some level, though, we as voters have got to look at people like Chris Christie, people like Jeb Bush, and go, really, do you really feel our pain? Do you have any clue what it's like to work our behinds off and still fall behind, to send our kids to school that have 30, 40, 50 kids in a classroom and lessened opportunities for them? Do you really get it? And I got to tell you, I hope the American people look at this and go, no, they don't understand what it's like to be us at all.
You know, I think the American people will get it. And then that's what we were trying to do, though. We're trying to show in real terms to the American people what these people actually mean, what they're actually proposing behind what they're saying. I mean, I'm glad you started off the segment talking about Walker and what he's done in Wisconsin. I mean, he always brags about how he's willing to take a fight, he's doing the hard things, but what you don't see is actually how badly the middle class has suffered under the Walker years. I mean, nowadays middle class incomes, in terms of how fast that they've grown, in Wisconsin they rank the 44th amongst the nation.
Yeah. No, I mean that's what he wants to bring to the nation. I mean, look at the wild success, and we talk to folks from Wisconsin all the time, and they tell us just how bad things have gotten under his leadership, and he wants to bring that here. This whole Southern strategy of stealing rights away from workers and pursuing the massive tax cuts for big business and the wealthy. It just seems to me what we were seeing is the Reagan-era policies really on huge amounts of steroids, because this is the same garbage they've been feeding us for now almost 40 years. I mean, at some point, I would love to share your optimism that we're going to get it, but I don't know. Because we've been having this same, if we give everything to the wealthy, it'll trickle down on the rest of us. I'm still waiting for the trickle. There's no roads of gold and honey. I haven't seen it yet. The only thing that I've been trickled on is yellow, yes, but it ain't gold and honey.
Yes, I think we're all waiting for this trickle-down fantasy of theirs to actually become reality. But, I mean, we've seen time and time again that's not the case. That these tax giveaways that they keep wanting to pass, for the very rich, the richest people who don't need it, that hasn't done anything for economy. That hasn't done anything for middle-class families. All that's done is made the rich richer.
Yep.
And so I think, you look at someone like Walker, he's calling the minimum wage a lame idea. And you look at someone like Bush, they slip up. When they think no one's paying attention, when they think, the cameras aren't on them, he says things like he thinks Americans should work more hours.
Yeah, that was great. Work more hours, no more money. And, hey, let's get rid of that Social Security thing. Let's get rid of that Medicare thing. Let's just get rid of the whole thing.
But, and so time again, but they will, when it's at a campaign announcement speech, they'll make it pretty. They have a whole bunch of people to finesse it with them and go through with the pollsters. But then, when they're caught unguarded, they say these crazy statements. And, of course, there's going to be lots of people that are going to hold them accountable. But we also want to look at when Rubio comes out with a tax plan that cuts capital gains tax. I mean, that's just nothing but a giveaway to the rich.
Absolutely. But let me ask you this, Anna, because, I look at their rhetoric, and I think I hope people are cognizant of how it's crafted. It's really crafted in a way that what's left of the middle class. And look, I'm somebody, like a lot of my friends who are clawing to stay in that middle class. And I think a lot of people are on that treadmill, just trying to keep up and stay where they are. And as you've pointed out in your writing, $10,600 over the 12-year span, that in income we should have gotten that we're paying out, that, oops, now that's coming from somewhere else. I look at their rhetoric as, well, you're struggling, and it's those people's fault. And it's not the wealthy, it's the poor, it's the welfare programs, it's the school lunch programs, it's all of the things. And then thus, you take that to the next step, it's those minorities. And this is where they've done masterfully, I think, at dividing us and pitting us against one another, that we think that somehow the person behind us is the one that's pushing us down.
Mm-hmm. And, I am a little bit optimistic, though, because, yes, that is where they're going to go. But I think the fact that they have now changed their rhetoric so much so that instead of saying we need to help the job creators, to now pivoting to we need to help in the middle class, to someone like Paul Ryan going on a poverty tour, I think they're realizing finally that what they've been trying to sell hasn't worked. And I think they're realizing that the American people aren't going to buy it anymore. And so, yes, I think they will do what you're saying. They will still, at the end of the day, try to divide us, try to blame it on the poor, try to blame it on the minorities. But I think they're realizing that it's becoming harder and harder to do, because I think they realize that we're starting to catch on.
Well, it's about time after 30 years. Maybe we can get it, because I look here in Pennsylvania and I bring back things back to our backyard. We've still got Republicans in the House and Senate here who are still talking about, almost no increase to education. And we've got a very progressive governor, and I think a great guy, saying, no, we need to do some bold stuff. We need to really invest in education, because to me, education is that hill the working class of this country has to die on. They take that from us, it's over. And I look at what's been going on, especially here in Pennsylvania and in places like Wisconsin and Maine and in Ohio, where the Tea Party governors took over. Massive cuts to education, massive defunding of our higher education systems, just dangerous stuff.
Mm-hmm. No, it's terrible. I mean, we took a look at who was cutting what in terms of higher education funding, and we saw that overall the GOP governors dramatically cut state funding for public universities, far more than Democrats. They actually cut over, the course of 2007 to 2014, they cut it by close to 10%.
Wow.
And so it's not surprising then that you see these hikes in tuition. And so everyone is concerned about the cost of higher education, about how my kids are going to afford college, how they graduate with massive amounts of debt. Well, of course, if you're cutting, let's take a look at Walker, right? If you are giving tax cuts that predominantly benefit the wealthy, but then slash funding for public universities, well, it's our families and our kids that are going to bear the brunt of that decision.
Absolutely. But can't you look at, you look from the Reagan years till today. What we have seen and what we've been a part of is a massive redistribution of wealth from the working class of this country upward to the billionaire class that we created. And you can go back and look at the numbers. There were only a handful of billionaires by today's numbers back in the Reagan years. We've now got, 1,500, 1,800, 2,000 billionaires that we've created through lack of investment in infrastructure, lack of investment in education, and, oh, by the way, destruction of opportunity for wage increases. We've basically created a wealth class out of our, as I say, out of the tears and broken hearts of working people.
Yes, these are all policy decisions that have been made. And so, everything you're listing is right. Massive funding cuts, massive deterioration of worker rights, and also they've gotten really smart at being able to secure lower and lower tax rates for themselves. I mean, you've seen an almost consistent decline in tax rates for the uber wealthy, since the end of the World War.
Yep.
The last World War. And so, but I think the fact that these are policy decisions also tells us we can make a different decision here. And, we can stand up, and we have to stand up and say we demand, a different system. We demand, fairer rules of the road for everyone.
And, as I've said a million times on this program, we need to go back to have the conversation. Were the socialist days of Dwight David Eisenhower, were those better days? I would argue with revenue coming into our system and paying for schools and roads and bridges and all of those infrastructural things that we need, I would answer yes.
Yeah, and you know what? That's when our economy grew the best, too. It's when we made those investments that helped the middle class and grew the middle class, that's when our economy grew, too, because the growth comes from us.
Yep. So let me ask you the last line of questioning on this then. So we flip this over. We know the Republicans suck, and I've been saying that for the longest time. Top to bottom, they're all in line with more tax cuts for the wealthy, deregulation. Let's break up the unions, go the Southern strategy route, and have no labor laws whatsoever. Basically, taking us back to the days of Lochner. Are the Democrats any better? I mean, have you guys done a study saying, this is the rhetoric and these are the statements from Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton? Because, if you're saying these guys are horrible, is there an alternative?
So I am going to really look forward to a lot of these candidates coming out and drilling down. But what I've seen so far in terms of a lot of these candidates talking about reducing costs of higher education, in terms of the need to raise wages, in terms of the need to curb speculative short-term behavior on Wall Street, that type of proposals and ideas that are being floated on our side gives me heart.
So there is an alternative, because a lot of people say, well, we know a lot of my Republican friends say, yeah, we know our party screwed up, but those bad Democrats, they don't have a plan. And I keep saying, no, we need to be increasing the minimum wage. We need to do something about student loan debt. What we've done to this generation of college students, to me, is no short of criminal.
Yes. And I think as soon as the Trump circus dies down, perhaps, they'll be able to focus elsewhere and listen to what people are actually saying.
No, I'm telling you, I'm hoping the Trump circus doesn't die down. I hope I hope he rides the Trump train right into convention time, and I wouldn't even mind to see him be the nominee.
It would be very, very entertaining.
And because I know he doesn't feel our pain. But if you want to take a look at the study of the middle class at risk, Anna Chu is one of the co-authors of it. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Just click on Anna's name. It'll take you right there. Anna, it's always great talking with you, and I'd love to have you back again real soon.
Yes, great. Thank you so much, Rick.
Fabulous. Thanks so much. Let's take a quick break. Right back. 1-888-520-RICK. 1-888-520-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1913. Silk workers in Paterson, New Jersey ended their unsuccessful 6-month strike. By 1900, Paterson had won the nickname Silk City. Skilled weavers, ribbon weavers in particular, were proud of their craft. They were tenacious in fighting for the respect and decent wages they thought they deserved. Earlier that spring, these skilled ribbon weavers united all of the silk workers and went on strike. The strikers' main demand was a call for the 8-hour workday. The strikers were aided by members of the industrial workers of the world, most notably Big Bill Haywood and Elizabeth Gurley Flynn. The strike also drew attention from intellectuals in Greenwich Village in New York. In fact, some time after the strike started, many of the Greenwich villagers came to Paterson to observe the strike firsthand. They were impressed by the solidarity among the many nationalities of the silk workers and the courage of the strikers. The strike spread to other towns in New Jersey, as well as Pennsylvania, New York, and Connecticut. Meanwhile, by May, the Greenwich villagers were working on what they called the Paterson Pageant. They hoped to bring public attention to the workers' struggles by staging a dramatic performance of the strike. On June 7th, Madison Square Garden was overflowing with 15,000 audience members, and more filling the standing room only. Yet, while the Paterson Pageant did bring money into the strike fund, this was not enough to help all of the workers on strike. Finally, the strikers returned to work. They were able to get a 9-hour workday at most job sites. But the elusive quest for the 8-hour day remained incomplete. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We've been discussing the evolution of small taverns and inns into lodging houses and then to hotels as we know them today. While the lodging houses were proliferating in the city of Boston during the early 1800s, a 20-year-old farm boy from Maine set foot in Boston Harbor. His name was Harvey D. Parker. He arrived broke but quickly found a low-wage job. From there, he showed a grand work ethic, ambition, and an entrepreneurial spirit. 7 years after landing in Boston, still in his 20s, he had saved enough money to buy John Hunt's restaurant on the Court Square. Over the next 22 years, Parker's restaurant flourished, and he served and befriended a highbrow clientele. He took on a partner, and by 1854, Parker was ready to embark on his grandest enterprise. Join us again for a hotel full of politicians. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So, it's one of these moments where I'm just waiting for Jerry Springer to jump out and yell, "Surprise! It's a gag! It's all a gag! The Trumpster, the hair, the whole night, all a gag." Because on Monday evening, evidently one of Trump's advisors, one of his top advisors, said that, and you've heard this kind of logic before, that you can't rape your spouse. So he comes out and he's, well, you can't do that. No, the Trump campaigns go, whoa, don't get us in the middle of all this, because immediately now some advisor says something really stupid, and now it's the campaign. So the Michael Cohen, who is the guy who made the comments, he's the executive vice president of the Trump Organization and a special counsel. Why anyone's interviewing him, okay, I don't know. But Mr. Trump didn't know of his comments, but disagrees with him, according to the spokesperson, because now he does think that it's rape with a spouse. I guess this is the new thing. As the spokesperson said, Trump speaks for Mr. Trump, but nobody speaks. Mr. Trump speaks for himself. Okay, got that. So we know Trump's the guy. He says his own thing. But if you remember, and this is one of those things now, I guess we're going to have to drudge up his divorce. If you remember, Ivana was claiming that the Donald had raped her during their marriage. Again, it's one of those tabloid things. She has now walked back from that. Interesting kind of moments. But again, you gotta love the Jerry Springer kind of level that this has gone to, and the kind of distraction that we better get used to. I mean, because this is gonna be a pie fight. I hope the GOP convention is not settled. I hope there's no nominee, and I hope you see a fight live with clowns and midgets and monkeys and pies and all of that stuff.
Are we going to have a midget tossing contest now? Are you telling me that?
I would assume that they will.
No, I think the funniest thing about this latest Trump episode is like everyone on the left is like, this is it. This is the one in sicko.
Doesn't bring him down. Get out of here.
And I'm just sitting there like, no.
No.
The Trump is not going anywhere.
No. He's in it because he's got the money. And if you look at his financial disclosure forms, which, wow, 92 pages. 515 entities where he's the president or chairman or both.
And he sells more in mattresses a year than Marco Rubio's total net worth. How does that make you feel if you're Marco Rubio?
The chances of you beating him in an election? Probably not. But think about that. 515 companies or entities where he's the head guy. They went through his 92-page thing. They claimed, I guess Trump claims that he has a net worth of at least $1.35 billion in his companies and real estate holdings. He has about $70.5 million in liquid assets. That would be in cash. So he's got $70 million just to throw around. He's got about $250 million in liabilities. And the question that I had that wasn't in the filings, how much has he got stashed offshore? How much is in the Caymans? How much is in Luxembourg? How much do we have in these little mailboxes? How much is stored away from we, the taxpayers? What I did find very interesting, and a lot of my union friends found quite interesting, is that according to his financial disclosure, he actually gets a $110,228 pension from the Screen Actors Guild because of that TV show.
On a monthly basis.
On a monthly basis. No, that's a year. That's his yearly pension. He gets a year, $110,000 a year from the TV show he does. And I'm going, wait a second. The guy who wrote the show doesn't get that much. How is it that he gets it?
$12,000 a month. Hey, I would take that. Would you take $12,000 a month for enjoying retirement?
Now, according to some news outlets, they claim that it's nearly impossible from the federal forms to figure out if he's really worth the $10 billion that he claims, because the Federal Election Commission's paperwork doesn't really have a way. I don't think they ever envisioned someone worth $10 billion. All they have is a category that says, do you have assets worth more than $50 million? And he has 23 of those. So, I mean, think about that for a second. I mean, so if anyone thinks he cares about you or me, if you think he feels our pain,
and wait, he's like over $1 billion, at least $750 million in debt.
No, his liabilities.
Expenses and liabilities.
Yeah, $260 million, $250 million. But at some point, someone has to take us by the shoulders and just shake us. I'm going to wake up now because this guy doesn't care about you. And you are not on his list.
That's the best part about this campaign. He doesn't care.
And that's what's beautiful about it. He's saying what I've been telling you people like him and the Republican Party have been saying for a generation now. This is what they say in their country clubs. This is what they think of you when they're so happy that you've cleaned up after them. This is what they say.
He is the id.
Exactly, and that's a perfect frame for it. He really is. And it's not about you. It's not about me. Understand, it's about the ego. It's about the id. Simple stuff. But very good, and I can't wait. I'm loving it. I think it's going to be very interesting in the next couple of weeks and months to see the Donald. And I'm so waiting for the big debate.
The first debate, August 6th.
Quick break. Right back.
We're headstrong, back off, I'll take you on. Headstrong to take on anyone. I know that you are wrong if this is not where you belong. I won't give everything away.
I'm still not sure of all the causes and all the science.
Ohio Governor John Kasich jumps into the 2016 race. We'll try to decipher his position on climate change.
One of the things that preceded the failure of the nation-state of Syria and the rise of ISIS was the effect of climate change.
The Democratic presidential candidate Martin O'Malley links global warming to Middle East unrest and ISIS.
If he is saying that, then my use of aerosol hairspray is as bad as beheadings.
And Fox News heads explode. Plus,
right in the middle of this problem, we have fierce opposition and blind inertia.
California Governor Jerry Brown slams climate science deniers.
All of those slams and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comments.
Of course, we've got to be concerned about it, but we shouldn't worship the environment.
No, we should worship a great big, huge, invisible, bearded, floating guy in the sky. Like you, Governor. That makes much more sense. Am I right? This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I suspect you may be breathing a sigh of relief. We have maybe, just maybe, the final major presidential candidate to enter the race this week, which means your yeoman's job of tracking each of their climate change positions over these past many months is almost over.
There are probably a few more that are going to pop up anyway. They're like whack-a-mole.
All right, well, you just keep whacking. What do you have for us today?
Well, first, the 16th Republican has now jumped into the race for the 2016 Republican presidential nomination. Ohio Governor John Kasich announced his bid on Tuesday. Now, as we've said, we've been tracking the climate change positions of all of the official 2016 candidates, and in an interview with the Financial Times just 2 weeks ago, Kasich said he believes climate change is happening, but he's not sure it's time to do anything about it.
We have an obligation to the environment. Of course, we've got to be concerned about it, but we shouldn't worship the environment. And I wouldn't want to create any kind of dramatic economic change of policy, because I'm still not sure, I don't know that anybody is fully sure of all the causes and all the science.
Oh, man. All right, let's unpack that. First, nobody's worshiping the environment. What we're trying to say is, let's keep the planet alive. That's all it is. And the idea that yeah, we may have to spend a lot of money to save ourselves, given that we have spent so much more money essentially killing ourselves over the past 50, 100 years. And yes, people do know who is responsible. It is man.
And in more recent history, in practice as governor, Kasich rejected federal funding for high-speed rail and rolled back Ohio's wildly successful renewable electricity standard, which had saved Ohioans over $200 million and lowered their electricity rates.
So is it fair to say that John Kasich both pretends to not be a denier and pretends to be a denier?
All at the same time. It's quite a trick.
He's very good.
Right-wing media was in an uproar this week after Democratic presidential candidate and former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley linked historic mega-drought in the Middle East to unrest in the region.
One of the things that preceded the failure of the nation-state of Syria, the rise of ISIS, was the effect of climate change and the mega-drought that affected that region, wiped out farmers, drove people to cities, created a humanitarian crisis. It created the conditions of extreme poverty that has led now to the rise of ISIL and this extreme violence.
Heads exploded in right-wing media land, figuratively, of course. Here's Fox News host Kennedy.
Oh, that's it. It's the mega drought. Finally, we know. I guess when you mix a rise in temperature with a lack of water, you get an Islamic caliphate.
Of course, don't tell Fox News, but the Pentagon calls global warming a threat multiplier, and multiple studies have found climate change worsened the 2011 drought in Syria and played a role in triggering Syria's civil war.
And we have covered that time and time again on the Green News Report, so I guess they just can't be bothered to do actual research over at Fox News.
Meanwhile, California Governor Jerry Brown blasted the climate change denial industry and their friends in politics and the media for obstructing action on climate change at a two-day climate summit at the Vatican in Rome this week.
We are talking about extinction. We're talking about climate regimes that have not been seen for tens of millions of years, that requires that we react. Right in the middle of this problem, we have fierce opposition and blind inertia. And that opposition is well-financed.
And former California governor and action movie star Arnold Schwarzenegger also warned the conference, quote, "I've starred in a lot of science fiction movies, and let me tell you something, climate change is not science fiction."
And that's the guy who used to drive his Hummer around proudly as a denier. People can change. Only question is, will they do it before it's too late? For much more on that story and all of the others we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget, you can download the Green News Report anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes from bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Rebuilding America. The Rick Smith Show.
The walls come tumbling down. The walls come crumbling, crumbling. The walls come tumbling, tumbling down.
Well, it looks like the Senate is still debating or working on getting that transportation bill passed through. That I think McConnell got some of it passed through, and the right wing was going nuts over it. It's a 6-year deal, from what I understand, that only funds 3 of it. I don't know. It seems kind of crazy. Why can't we just fund the damn thing? Why can't we just go, you know what? The roads suck. The roads are horrible, and if you drive around Washington, D.C., like I just did, like I talked about the other day, I was coming on the 495 ramp north to get out of D.C., and it said, careful, rumble strips. I didn't feel any rumble strips. All I felt were bomb crater spots where potholes were. No rumble strips, but bombs. It looks like bombs went off in the middle of the road. Maybe if we paved that, maybe my front end would be okay. But I understand that no matter what happens in the Senate, the House has no appetite for it. It just seems nuts to me. I'm here to talk a little bit about it, why we can't get a transportation bill. I've got Abe Amoros. He's the Pennsylvania Legislative Director here for LIUNA. Abe, thanks for taking time for us.
You're welcome, Rick. Thanks for having me.
So this is just kind of dumb to me. There was a time, I think, sometime in my lifetime, sometime where transportation, getting to and from work, getting to the mall, getting wherever you're going to go, where that was kind of a nonpartisan issue. It was kind of a, yeah, we all need it. Let's do it.
That's right, Rick. I mean, this is a common sense solution to a horrible nationwide problem. Everybody's got potholes in their streets and highways, and then they need to be fixed. Our infrastructure is falling apart. And why the Senate and the House cannot come to some sort of an agreement is beyond me. I mean, you've got all kinds of factions within the Republican Party that some of them like the status quo, some of them don't want to raise any money in terms of financing projects such as this, because this is going to be a long-term project. And what Mitch McConnell has put forth is a $350 billion transportation bill, and it would set highway, transit, rail policy for the next 6 years. And I know it's going to be funded for 3 years, but you know what, Rick? We can't keep putting Band-Aids on this.
Right.
Because what they have done, in essence, is they keep kicking the can down the road. Everybody likes that term, but it's the most appropriate one that I can come up with anyway, because you're talking about 3-month extensions, 6-month extensions, 12-month extensions. Why don't we show some real political courage up in that big, beautiful building in Washington and do the right thing? I mean, it's going to put hundreds of thousands of people, actually millions of people, back to work. It's going to stimulate local economies, which is good for everybody's tax base. And, I just can't understand why there isn't that collective political courage to do something that makes sense, especially in this climate, Rick, where everybody's just climbing all over each other. They can't find agreement on anything. And something so basic, so fundamental as fixing our roads, highways, bridges, railroad systems, ports, aviation stations, anything that will help America move forward. I just don't understand it. It is so frustrating. It really is.
I mean, it absolutely is. And the reality is you can only kick the can down the road so far, to use your analogy, until the can gets swallowed up in a sinkhole or a pothole or falls off the edge because the bridge isn't there anymore.
That's right, Rick. I mean, look, you're talking about auto and highway safety, okay? And, there are provisions in this bill that would address those issues as well. I mean, do we really have to wait for a national tragedy to strike? Do we really need to wait for a bridge to collapse on, God forbid, a school bus? Or, something falling into the water? I mean, cars falling into the water because they couldn't successfully cross from one side of the bridge to the next. I mean, are we really looking for a Hollywood moment here before something gets done? And, I blame the Republican leadership for not moving forward. I mean, as often as I disagree with Mitch McConnell, at least I give him credit for trying to push this $350 billion package through. And maybe this is a result of some other things that have happened recently in terms of being accused of certain things by members of his own caucus there in the Senate. Who knows? But it's got to be done.
Yep.
And I know that the Democrats are just salivating to vote for something like this because it makes sense. It doesn't just score political points with the electorate, but it makes sense. It's an economic decision that helps move products. It helps move people. And it cuts back on time lost in productivity because you're sitting in a traffic jam because the road up ahead is completely clogged as a result of potholes or destructed guardrails. I mean, this is just common sense stuff, Rick, and I just can't understand why they let any day go by without a meaningful solution. It's very frustrating.
And the weird thing is this is good for business as well. So you would think that the business conservatives, the business Republicans would go, oh yeah, it's good for business, let's do this. And I can understand if you're arguing big, let's try and screw workers while doing it would be their side of it too. But at least have the conversation of moving things forward. And my favorite rhetoric, because if you go back to a couple of years back, the Republicans were yelling about certainty. Business needs certainty. don't construction projects, I mean, you're the expert in this. Don't you need to know in 3 months if you're going to have funding to complete a project before you start it? Doesn't that make some sense?
Absolutely. It makes all the sense in the world to have a proper planning procedure in place that anticipates when work will begin, when it will end, and everything leading up to it. You've got to start with those conversations. And Rick, unfortunately, anything that requires a dollar sign with it today gets completely cast off to the side by members of the Republican Party.
Unless it's tax cuts for rich people.
That's right. Unless it's tax cuts for rich people to once again pad the top by taking from the bottom. And you mentioned workers. I'm so sick of our people, our guys and gals who work hard on a daily basis, being demonized on the cost of these projects. It's not the labor costs that are going through the roof. It's the cost of materials. It's engineering studies that go through the stinking roof on a daily basis that you have to have according to law on these things. And you have to have these studies because obviously these things have to be constructed in a safe and efficient fashion. But they demonize the workers. Why? Because it's easy. Because it's easy that way. And you know, these solutions don't come so quickly, and you know, the conversations aren't taking place, Rick, like you said, and that's really, really challenging right now.
And now you see that, you know, there's this push in Congress to make trucks bigger. There's talk of having twin 33s as opposed to 28-foot trailers, and I'm sure what's coming behind it is increasing the size of the single trailers from 53 to 59.5. And you look at this stuff, and you go, at some point, you have to have an infrastructure where those vehicles, if you're going to push it through, and this is the direction we're going, you've got to have an infrastructure that fits those kind of vehicles. And look, as a guy who's driven a truck for a living, our infrastructure does not have the ability to have those kind of vehicles on the road.
You are correct. We simply do not have the capacity. And now what we're putting forth is proposals and ideas to make the rigs bigger, which are going to tear up more roads and bridges. But there's no solution in place as to fixing them. So what we're doing is we're causing another problem. We're putting more force into these areas, and you're just straining the infrastructure, and at some point it's going to crack. And again, I think we're waiting for a Hollywood moment here, Rick, something tragic to happen, so then everybody sweeps in and tries to come up with a solution. That's the sad part of it here. I go back to the phrase I used earlier, political courage. There's no political courage to get things done in this Congress. I mean, it's just absolutely mind-boggling.
Yeah, I mean,
and
sadly,
until something tragic happens, we're going to sit on our hands, man.
Sadly, you're right. I mean, what worries me is that it has to be another I-35, which I love how I love the rationale they gave for why the I-35 bridge collapsed. I'm still stuck on that. It was birds.
Right. Unbelievable.
It was birds.
Again, yeah.
Birds brought a bridge down.
Classic case of no one wanting to accept responsibility or accountability. It is a common theme in this Congress. No one wishes to accept responsibility, to acknowledge that a problem exists, and collectively put forth solutions. You know, everybody rushes to judgment. Everybody points at this as being too costly. And again, they're afraid of anything that comes with a dollar sign except those tax breaks for the wealthy.
So let me ask you the other side of this then, because you said, you know, they're saying it's too costly. How costly is inaction? How exactly. Costly if we go another 5 years with doing nothing? How costly does it then become? What infuriates me, Abe, and I'm so sick of these T-twits telling me, well, we can't spend money. 4 or 5 years ago, we had an opportunity to borrow money almost free. There were countries around the world going, here, take our money, take it. Just don't let it devalue. So we could have gotten money free to do all of these infrastructural improvement projects, and we would have paid dollar cost for it.
Right.
And yet that window is quickly closing as interest rates continue to go up. So as they go up, we're gonna be in a position where there's only going to be so much we can do with the limited resources that we have.
That's right, Rick. And then getting back to your original question there, the cost will be more than just dollars and cents. It'll be people's lives. It'll be snuffing out young futures with the death of children if we wait for that Hollywood moment to take place. That's the real cost. That's my real fear, that we're going to stop talking about dollars and cents and looking at this in terms of the cost of human life. And that, my friend, is the most tragic statement that we can make as Americans, is waiting for something like that, because our leaders don't have that collective courage and that will to do what's right and pass a comprehensive bill that addresses every fraction of our infrastructure and properly invest. This is not spending or wasting money. This is investing in our future. It creates jobs. It fixes these horrific highways, streets, and roads and bridges, many of which should not even be driven on today. You know it and I know it.
Yep.
I mean, you have been on more roads than I have, and so you understand just how delicate some of them can be. And they're ready to crack. And I think we're waiting for that Hollywood moment, once again, before something gets done. And I'll tell you, that just does not send the right message to the American people.
Yeah, and as a truck driver, look, you've got to be cognizant of weight restrictions now.
Right.
Because a lot of the bridges now have weight restrictions, because you're going, well, you know, they're in bad shape, and we don't want to put any real weight on it because it might go at any time, which is not a good thing. So let me bring this back to, you know, what's possibly going to happen. There doesn't seem to be any appetite in the House to pass the Senate version. The House is talking about a short-term extension. What happens if nothing happens? What happens if they continue to be gridlocked? Because I understand at the end of this month, everything goes empty. There's no more money, right?
That's right, Rick. There's no more money, and then we are flirting with disaster once again. These guys are tiptoeing up to the line, tiptoeing up to the line and taking their shoes off to feel the gravel beneath their feet, man. They're not doing the right thing. They're not having these discussions. They're wasting time. They're infighting, and they're not providing a real solution. My biggest fear is that nothing is going to get done, and we're going to continue flirting with that disaster, and then it's just going to be a question of time, my friend, as to what's going to take place, when it's going to take place. And I give it just a few months before something cataclysmic happens in terms of a collapse in our infrastructure. With a lot of lives lost, and many of them might be children. That's my biggest fear. So they have got to do something. If Mitch McConnell is a true leader, he needs to reach out to John Boehner and say, hey, what gives? Something's got to happen on your side. We're ready to do something constructive, positive, to reinforce this issue, and you guys have done nothing. What is going on here? But these discussions aren't taking place, Rick. The only ones making any noise about it are the Democrats, and of course the Democrats are not in charge.
See, to me, politically, wouldn't you think? And you're the guy here who deals with these folks. Wouldn't you think politically that you would want a long enough deal? You say, you know what, we did it for 6 years. We don't have to deal with this anymore. It's not, because I don't know that this is really a campaign issue that you're going to make money on. I don't get why it can't get done, but you would think you would want to make a deal long enough that look, Americans have political amnesia. We forget what happened yesterday.
Absolutely.
You make your deal long enough, and you fix stuff, and forget about it.
Right. It's the vocal minority, the Tea Party people, the right-wingers, that are holding the rest of the Republican Party hostage, Rick.
Jeez.
And there are some reasonable people over there that want to get things done. Well, and we can question their motives all we want. The bottom line is that they vote for the bill. And that's the thing that I'd be most happy with right now. But they're allowing themselves to be held hostage by the fringe element who doesn't want to address the issues head on, doesn't want to spend any money, and that's the frustrating part. That's the sad part. And these guys and gals, Rick, they don't really answer to their constituents. I mean, they really don't. Not the majority of them anyway. They only answer to that small Tea Party vocal minority that just likes to set fires and see what happens. And in this instance, they're just flirting with disaster.
Seems kind of dumb to me. But, Abe, I appreciate you taking some time for us, filling us in. Always great talking with you, man.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Abe Amoros, Legislative Director here in Pennsylvania for LIUNA. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
They don't faze me, even if I look and act really crazy. I don't wait till she betrayed me. Now my vision is no longer hazy. I'm very lucky to have my crew. Bitch to find me when she through. I've been knocked down, beat down, black and blue. She's not the one coming back for you. She's not the one coming back for you. If I fall back down, you're gonna be back up again. If I fall back down, you're gonna be my friend.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. The Obama administration is walking a tightrope as it seeks to deepen diplomatic engagement around the world while maintaining pressure on human rights issues. We begin in Kenya, where gay marriage isn't just illegal, but simply being gay could land you 14 years in prison. At a press conference there over the weekend, President Obama had this exchange with Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta.
When you start treating people differently, not because of any harm they're doing anybody, but because they're different, that's the path whereby freedoms begin to erode. And bad things happen.
Kenyatta was defiant.
It's very difficult for us to be able to impose on people that which they themselves do not accept. This is why I repeatedly say that for Kenyans today, the issue of gay rights is really a non-issue.
And re-engagement with Cuba has entailed more than issuing friendly statements in Washington, but removing such designations as Cuba's spot on the state sponsors of terrorism list. Today, the State Department also upgraded Cuba's status on its 2015 Trafficking in Persons report. In other words, Cuba is trying to improve things, but still falls short of minimum standards. Malaysia also received an upgrade, but skeptical journalists note the country is involved in sensitive Trans-Pacific Partnership talks with the U.S., and maybe shouldn't have been given a boost. In May, dozens of mass graves were found along Malaysia's border with Thailand, reportedly part of a long human trafficking route from Myanmar. For more global news headlines, visit TalkRadioNews.com.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
The Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
So if you think there's not a difference between whites and blacks with response to police practices, I got to point to this situation out in Oregon. And I just found this to be one of those very bizarre kind of, just kind of weird scenarios. It was Vancouver, Washington, really a beautiful place. Been there, very nice. In fact, we were out there with the People's Tour for America back in 2013. A lot of fun. But evidently on Sunday, this guy, for one reason or another, walking around with a knife, attracted police attention. I guess he was just naked and walking around with a knife. Did I mention he was naked? No, naked, walking around with a knife. Ends up going home. The police, meet him at his house, where he holds them off for 2 hours. 2 hours, naked guy with a knife. They stood and they watched him with his guitar singing and serenading the police. And you go, what? Explain this to me. 2 hours the police put up with a white guy naked with a knife playing guitar. Now, maybe he was good at playing the guitar. I don't know. Maybe he was maybe he was singing a song they liked. I don't know. But you got to ask yourself, if that were a black guy who were not following commands, because remember, if you look at the Sandra Bland video, she wouldn't get out of the car. He said, get out. She said, no. He grabbed her, pulled her, threw her, all that stuff for just not wanting to get out of the car. This guy's got a freaking knife, naked with a knife. And 2 hour standoff. Until eventually they shot him with what they put as a non-lethal round. So they hit him with a big beanbag. Which, as I understand, can still be lethal, but where's the multiple gunshots? Where's what we're seeing almost weekly across this country with black people? Did I miss it? Evidently, they charged him with felony assault. They booked him at the Clark County Jail there. He's awaiting trial, from what I understand. And I guess I think I read somewhere that he was being held on $7,000 bond, which I'm sure he's probably even out by now. Going back to my economic argument, because I'm sure he had the money. He had a guitar. He was naked, walking around with a knife. To me, that sounds like mental health problems. But I guess to me, it shows the difference between how we treat whites and blacks and how we treat people with economic means and the poor. Because you look at the house, he lived in a pretty nice neighborhood. Amazing stuff to me. Anyway, if you missed any portion of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on your smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me here, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Love to hear it. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people on the top. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. Verizon is demanding concessions from its 39,000 CWA and IBEW union workers, despite revenue of $127 billion and projected profit this year of $9.6 billion. IBEW Local 2222's Miles Calvi says a strike has been authorized, with one more week of bargaining to go before the current contract expires.
What we're looking for, needless to maintain job security. We definitely understand some of the issues going forward with healthcare, but we need improvements on the pension. We don't need an elimination of the pension.
Verizon workers rallied in New York City over the weekend and will rally again in Boston Thursday. The unions say company demands include contracting out union work, shifting more healthcare costs onto workers, cutting pensions, and abandoning expansion of FiOS. The union wants expansion of FiOS, Verizon's bundled fiber optic internet, TV, and phone service. CWA Vice President Dennis Traynor says at the bargaining table so far, Verizon's only interest has been to try to screw its workers. 13 fired workers ordered reinstated by the NLRB at Terex in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, are still waiting to get their jobs back. The labor board ruled that Terex, also known as ASV Inc., illegally fired the workers for union activity. The NLRB ordered the company to take the workers back and to recognize and bargain with the Boilermakers Union. The NLRB decision said Terex ASV illegally threatened to close the plant, made coercive statements, interrogated workers, and finally fired 13 of them for supporting the union. The company is appealing that decision. Mike Casso is one of the fired pro-union workers.
Just because we're working class people, we're not stupid. We're not going to lay down and play dead to the CEOs of these big companies. We didn't start this whole thing for a big pay raise. We started because, these guys are basically raping us. Every time we turned around, they were taking benefits away from us.
Casso says he's angry at the illegal treatment he's getting from Terex ASV, and he says the company did nothing when an anti-union worker threatened pro-union workers with violence.
I was basically pissed. I ain't gonna lie. They tried to insult my intelligence. You got to expect it coming from a multi-million-dollar global business. They're going to try and push the little guy around, and this is what this was all about, is being treated fair, and it wasn't happening. We had a worker that walked up to a co-worker and told him, "You vote yes for this union. Oh, I know where you live. I'll burn you out of your house. I'll burn your house down." This individual went to our boss and told him, "Hey, this is what's going on." The guy never even thought twice about coming down on the floor. He ignored the whole situation.
Workers Independent News is brought to you by the American Federation of Teachers and its 1.6 million members working to reclaim the promise of public education, health care, and public services for our students, their families, and our communities. More information online at aft.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
There is no other agency like the EPA. It should really be renamed the Job-Killing Organization of America.
Because, brothers, it's a fact. If we take and don't put back, they'll have to pay for all we did. So let's leave some good brothers. Let's leave some green on the ground. Slowly as tomorrow, let's save some fun tomorrow. We didn't pass it on down.
What a hippie liberal idea, saving the environment, leaving some grass for our children, maybe clean air and clean water. No, we need profit today. So if let all that go, we need it now. Drill, baby, drill, and all of that. Just kind of bizarre. Anyway, welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. I love me some Michelle Bachmann. I'm sad to see she's not running for presidency, bringing her insanity with her. But there is this thought out there that the hoax of global warming and it's just a liberal plot. Look, I grew up in the 70s where we had this thing called acid rain. And you know what? We don't have it anymore. Smart policy. Anyway, here to talk a little bit about that idea of maybe we'd like to drink clean water and breathe clean air. Heresy. I've asked Ed Perry. He's a retired aquatic biologist. A retired guy, 30 years with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. He's going around talking about why it's important that we save our wetlands and our streams here in Pennsylvania. Ed, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, great to be on the show, Rick. Thank you.
So, you hear this quite often, that global warming stuff, that's a hoax. It's all like a liberal plot. I don't think so. I mean, I've seen a lot of changes in my lifetime. I think it's something serious.
Well, if it's a hoax, it's being perpetrated by 97% of the climate scientists in the world, and every single scientific organization in North America who signs on to the consensus position that the planet is heating up and that we're the cause. This is the biggest conspiracy that's ever been perpetrated by anyone, and it's been joined by 97% of the climate scientists in the world.
Yeah, I mean, one guy explained it this way to me. If 97% of the doctors said, Rick, you should stop eating red meat, and 3% said, go on, right on, until you have your heart attack, I think I'd want to listen to the 97%. Just kind of a thought. But, here's the thing. In talking about clean water, and I know that's what you're out here doing, I think most of us thought, we passed a law back in the 70s that said we want clean water, we want clean air, and I grew up in Cleveland, which I like to say is the home of the Clean Water and Air Act, because as a kid, the air was horribly polluted. When my mother was a kid, the Cuyahoga River was on fire. There was a lot of bad stuff going on, and we've kind of cleaned that stuff up a little bit.
Yeah, that's a coincidence. I was born and raised in Cleveland, overlooking the steel mills, about a quarter of a mile from where the Cuyahoga River caught on fire. So I know something about clean water or dirty water. And you're right, the Clean Water Act was passed in 1972 with overwhelming bipartisan support. 96 Republicans joined with 151 Democrats to override President Nixon's veto. He said it would be a budget buster. It would cost too much. But guess what? Since the Clean Water Act was passed in 1972, our gross domestic product has doubled.
Yeah, it's amazing how we hear the same rhetoric, the same failed rhetoric that, we just can't do that. It's going to cost us too much. But I often say, what's the cost of inaction? If we don't do anything, what eventually happens to our water and our air and our streams and all of our environment? Look, at the end of the day, we're not going to destroy the planet. We're going to destroy the planet for us. It'll still be here. It'll be fine. It's just not for us.
Yeah, exactly. Back in '72, this is what Time magazine wrote about the Cuyahoga River. Some river, chocolate brown, oily, bubbling with subsurface gases. It oozes rather than it flows. Anyone who falls into the Cuyahoga River does not drown. He decays. And here, 40 years later, that same river that oozes now supports a run of salmon. So the Clean Water Act has been a huge success.
Yep.
And the reason for that is back then we only regulated discharges into major rivers. And the Clean Water Act required pollution to be controlled all the way to the headwaters of our small streams, which is now why almost all our nation's waters are fishable, swimmable, drinkable.
And that's a good thing. And I understand, because here's the thing. I think most people are like me, and I didn't realize that in 2001 and 2006 the Supreme Court made a decision that kind of threw the Clean Water or the Clean Water Act into some bit of chaos. I think most people are like me, think, well, we passed it. It's working. It's worked great. It's still in place and it's all enforceable. But evidently, I'm wrong.
Yeah, here's what happened. I was actually working at that time in the Clean Water Act program, and in 2000 there was a Supreme Court decision that all it did was say to the Corps, you cannot use the presence of migratory birds to determine federal jurisdiction. As a result of that ruling, the Bush administration called into question whether the Clean Water Act was ever intended to regulate headwater streams and so-called isolated wetlands. So from 2000 until today, because of the change in the regulations by the Bush administration, hundreds of thousands of headwater wetlands or headwater streams and over 20 million acres of wetlands no longer have federal protection.
Well, that's good for business, isn't it, Ed? That's a good thing. We should be happy that we've deregulated and allowed, the free market to take hold, right?
Well, that's who has been behind this. The Home Builders Association and the Farm Bureau have been lobbying Congress heavily to weaken this law. And now EPA is coming out with a new rule to fix that loophole that will store protection for 46,000 miles of Pennsylvania's headwater streams and over half its wetlands.
Oh, here we come. Here come the job-killing regulations, as Michelle Bachmann pointed out. It's going to kill the whole thing, right? It's the end.
Yeah, we conducted a poll, a nationwide poll, and we oversampled in Pennsylvania. And we skewed the poll towards Republican hunters and fishermen. And 38% of the people we polled were Republican hunters and fishers, and 28% were Democratic fishermen and hunters. Fully 83% of Pennsylvania hunters and anglers say the Clean Water Act has been a good thing for our country, and 85% of us agree we can protect our water quality and have a strong economy with good jobs for Americans at the same time without having to choose one over the other.
Right. And I would have to argue that, hunting and fishing in this state anyway is big business.
It is. It's huge.
And by boogering it up, you're really harming business. So if we were to put some common sense regulations in place, to be all serious, if we were to actually take care of our environment and regulate it in a way that is safe, is clean, but still, we can have your business and do all that stuff, I would argue that it's actually better for all of us, especially those people who hunt and fish and all of the people who make their livelihoods off of that.
Yeah, exactly. Businesses need clean water to run their operation just like we do.
Yeah, but we could buy it. We could buy it from Nestle like everybody else. I mean, isn't that the world we're heading towards? And this is what they're telling us. You don't have a right, Ed, to water in this country. You don't have an absolute right. If you want water, you should be able to buy out of the bottle like the rest of us.
Well, evidently some people think like that. I just told you the poll numbers, how there's such overwhelming support for EPA's work to restore the Clean Water Act protections to our headwater streams and wetlands. Yet every single Republican congressman in Pennsylvania opposes EPA's rule. They're simply out of touch with the people up in the hinterland.
Now, is that just a flat line? They disagree with the EPA? Because look, you had a presidential candidate who wanted to close down five bureaus of government. He could only name 3, but the EPA was one that he remembered. And it seemed like across the presidential field, they all want to get rid of the Department of Education, the EPA, the Department of Energy, all of those. But the EPA being a big one of them, because they firmly believe that any regulation from the EPA is a job killer. And it's a visceral thing with them. So even if you have the most common sense piece of legislation, Ed, they're viscerally opposed to it.
Yes, I'm afraid you're right about that.
So how do we change that? I mean, this is where I reach out to my Republican friends and they say, look, I understand there are some things that we agree on, clean water is something I think we can all agree on. Maybe you need to be taking your party back to somewhere near, I don't know, the edge of sanity. I'm not asking for too much, I don't think.
Well, you know, I am a Republican.
Good.
And
take your party back to sanity.
Yeah, I often say to my fellow Republicans, I said, look, I mean, clean water is important for all of us. 30% of us in Pennsylvania get our drinking water from these headwater streams that are no longer federally protected. And that's common throughout the country. Most of the people get their drinking water. A lot of people get their drinking water from these small headwater streams.
Yeah.
And they're the foundation of our fine trout streams. That's why we have such good trout fishing in Pennsylvania, because of these headwater streams.
So let me ask you this, then. I mean, you know, as a Republican voter, what is it? You know, how do you get your buddies to go, you know what, this is an important issue? Because your party has been trained like Pavlovian dogs to any time you hear of a regulation, you start frothing at the mouth. How do you get folks to come around to this?
Well, you know, not all of us are like that. You know, like I just mentioned, there's been overwhelming support in this poll from Republican hunters and anglers. Let me read you what one Republican angler said. He said, because they feed into larger streams, why not protect them? It would be kind of stupid not to. Another one said, protecting our fisheries and our drinking water should always be a priority. That's a Republican angler from Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I mean, water and air are those two things that you cannot live without. You can maybe live an extra couple of days without water, air a couple of minutes maybe. Why are we boogering it up? It's always been curious to me. And look, I guess the other question I would have for you going, look, I mean, your party, you said you're a registered Republican, and I would have to ask you why. I mean, that's one of those curious moments, because I really don't see the Republican voter, the Republican politician coming around to your way on this.
Yeah, you know, I joined the Republican Party in the late 80s, and it was a different time period.
Boy, was it.
Yeah, it was a different time. And I just haven't bothered to change. You know, you have to, when you go into the vote in the primary, you have to be either a Democrat or Republican. You can't be an independent. And I'm really an independent person. You know,
I think we all are on a certain point. But I would argue that the hope is, and the reason I keep focusing on the Republican part of this, is the sad reality is the leadership, the politicians, the heads have really lost touch with us. And what I'm hoping is by having some of my Republican listeners and friends hear you go, you know what? I'm in favor of this, and I'm a Republican. This is I believe in this stuff. Maybe that they'll start thinking, going, you know what? Maybe regulations aren't as bad as we've been force-fed to believe.
Yeah, the Farm Bureau and the home builders have put a full court press on this, and they are trying to scare the farming community. And they're just simply putting out information that is not true. I saw a headline published in an op-ed in the York Dispatch and the Wilkes-Barre Times Leader that said, EPA new rules regulate dry land. That is simply not true.
I'm confused. What does that even mean?
I have no idea, because it's not true. There's never been a permit required for farming dry land, and there never has been.
Wow, that's
never has been.
But again, you need to scare people to get them, you know, frothing at the mouth. So if it's the same thing with my gun friends. Anytime there's anything that goes on, or any even talk of it, they all get up in arms and, oh, crazy, they're coming. And to me, this is just more of the same kind of an MO, which is why I think it's important that you're doing what you're doing out here, talking about why this is such an important issue, not just for anglers and hunters and the outdoorsman types, but for people of the water drinking persuasion.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, my fellow Republican congressmen are out of touch because I've never seen poll numbers like this, so skewed in favor of a regulation that I've seen on this. Over 85% of my fellow hunters and anglers.
So let me ask you last line of questioning then. What do we do? What should people be doing? How do we fix this? How do we make sure that our water is secure and clean and pure for the fish and for the fishermen and for us water drinkers?
Well, you know, it goes down to the same thing. Our congressmen are not hearing from us, And, you know, we should expect more concern from them for clean water. But I'll tell you what, we're not going to get that concern unless they hear from us.
Yeah. So maybe we get the hunters and fishers with their rods and their guns show up at their office.
I don't know about guns. I'm a hunter and I've got plenty of guns, but I'm definitely not one of the ones in the camp of being able to have any gun that I want.
See, please get back involved in the party. Take them back to somewhere north of sanity, please. Because you seem like a reasonable guy where common sense is more the issue than political allegiance. And I hope that folks will get involved and call their representatives, maybe show up with just the fishing pole. That would be helpful.
I think that'd be a good idea.
There you go. Ed, it was great talking with you. I wish you nothing but the best, and you should come back and talk to us again sometime.
I'd like to, Rick. Thanks very much for the offer.
It was great talking with you. Ed Perry. Again, if you want to check out some of their stuff, we've got a link at thericksmithshow.com, how you can check out what Ed is doing and how you can help to make sure that we all have that stuff that we like to drink, that water stuff. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1913. Silk workers in Paterson, New Jersey ended their unsuccessful 6-month strike. By 1900, Paterson had won the nickname Silk City. Skilled weavers, ribbon weavers in particular, were proud of their craft. They were tenacious in fighting for the respect and decent wages they thought they deserved. Earlier that spring, these skilled ribbon weavers united all of the silk workers and went on strike. The strikers' main demand was a call for the 8-hour workday. The strikers were aided by members of the industrial workers of the world, most notably Big Bill Haywood and Elizabeth Gurley Flynn. The strike also drew attention from intellectuals in Greenwich Village in New York. In fact, sometime after the strike started, many of the Greenwich villagers came to Paterson to observe the strike firsthand. They were impressed by the solidarity among the many nationalities of the silk workers and the courage of the strikers. The strike spread to other towns in New Jersey, as well as Pennsylvania, New York, and Connecticut. Meanwhile, by May, the Greenwich villagers were working on what they called the Paterson Pageant. They hoped to bring public attention to the workers' struggles by staging a dramatic performance of the strike. On June 7th, Madison Square Garden was overflowing with 15,000 audience members, and more filling the standing room only. Yet, while the Paterson Pageant did bring money into the strike fund, this was not enough to help all of the workers on strike. Finally, the strikers returned to work. They were able to get a 9-hour workday at most job sites, but the elusive quest for the 8-hour day remained incomplete. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We've been discussing the evolution of small taverns and inns into lodging houses and then to hotels as we know them today. While the lodging houses were proliferating in the city of Boston during the early 1800s, a 20-year-old farm boy from Maine set foot in Boston Harbor. His name was Harvey D. Parker. He arrived broke but quickly found a low-wage job. From there, he showed a grand work ethic, ambition, and an entrepreneurial spirit. 7 years after landing in Boston, still in his 20s, he had saved enough money to buy John Hunt's restaurant on the Court Square. Over the next 22 years, Parker's restaurant flourished, and he served and befriended a highbrow clientele. He took on a partner, and by 1854, Parker was ready to embark on his grandest enterprise. Join us again for a hotel full of politicians. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME, Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
Bringing sanity and rational thought back to America. Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. You know, it's interesting, and I go back to the interview there with Ed Perry to talk about, you know, the water. I remember as a kid, you going into Lake Erie, and nobody went swimming in Lake Erie. Nobody. None of my friends. It wasn't one of those things, hey, let's go down to the lake and jump. No, because it was, like he pointed out, it was a murky brown muck. It didn't pour as much as it plopped. It was industry run amok. It was profiteering over people run amok. You had the steel mills who were just pumping raw everything into the rivers. And now remember, this is, you know, right after the Clean Water Act was passed in the 70s, where they were trying to clean some of that stuff up. In my lifetime, and in a very short period of time, they have cleaned Lake Erie up into a thriving ecosystem. I mean, there really is tons of life in there, and I've got friends who do the fishing thing and all of that. A bunch of my friends even do the scuba diving thing in Lake Erie because there are tons of wrecks all throughout the lake. And they say the same thing. The visibility's better, it's clearer, it's getting better every day. And now they're even thinking about, hey, it's so clean, let's sell it off. Let's pump it off and give it to the profiteers and sell it off. It's just, it's amazing to me. And now to see this kind of nonsense where we're not protecting our streams and headwater, it's just nuts.
Yeah, 3 years ago, or I think 5 or 6 years ago, actually, we went on vacation in Cedar Point. We went to Cedar Point, the amusement park in Ohio. We were staying in Port Clinton, and Lake Erie didn't look really attractive to me then, that's for sure. It had like a little like neon green tinge to it, but there was a nuclear power plant like within the distance of us.
Okay, yeah. And right out there also back in the 80s, they have a pipeline that goes right through there where they had I think it was a toluene spill, which a couple 100,000 gallons, went right into the water, which is always curious to me that you would put that kind of thing next to a waterway. Just okay, makes a lot of sense, especially one of the largest freshwater basins in the entire world. Seems really bright to me that you would want to do that to your water supply. That thing that you need to survive. That thing that keeps you alive. That your body's 70% of. Yeah, just that. Don't worry about it. In fact, I remember there was a time where they actually wanted to put radioactive waste in the salt mines under the lake. Thought that was a great storage solution. Let's just take all the radioactive waste, put it under the water that we drink.
Just keep on digging. Let's dig deep.
Brilliant. And to me, this is where you have to go, wait a second. I understand it wasn't the high radioactive waste, and we're not taking the nuclear waste from the power plant and putting it into the water. But just the messaging that comes out of that and the insanity.
The thought of screwing up the salt dome underneath of it.
Or just the idea that we're just going to screw up that thing that we need to survive. That water that we need along with the air. And I think about it. And when I was a kid, I had asthma horribly, and it was because of the pollution in the air. And you ask yourself, are we willing to have that kind of an environment again? Is that where we want to return to? Look at China as what corporate America wants for everywhere. Not just China, but everywhere. Kind of makes me think.
And if we did reelect Governor Corbett, we would be moving down that path.
Well, we didn't, so stop thinking that way.
Well, no, I'm just saying, because I know there was a few things that came up where we tried to go after endangered species in this state, and we also did things that were kind of under the radar, where we got rid of protecting riparian buffers, which are those buffer zones between the creeks and streams, where you have to at least have a 10, 15.
No, we don't need
buffer.
that. Let's put a house right on the stream. Let the stream run.
Well, no, this is
house.
like in the farms in Kutztown. You have farms everywhere, but you could not have your farm going right up to the stream or the creek. You had to have a 20-foot buffer of vegetation growth between your farm to prevent all the manure and the runoff and the fertilizers from going in there. That's one of the things that the legislature actually got rid of last year.
Yeah, and you look at the Chesapeake Bay project. It's the same kind of thing. All of that runoff has caused a big part of that problem, which I'm sure you know much better than I do.
Yeah, I mean we're actually really bad when it comes towards protecting the Chesapeake watershed.
But we want food. And that's what they've put us into. It's that kind of
and we're the biggest polluter of the Chesapeake Bay.
Yeah, well, but that's the kind of choice they give us. Well, we have to pollute because we want to eat.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that it?
I don't think so. I mean, because there's ways of protecting the water streams.
See, now there you go, common sense. See, this is where I'm trying to take you. Come on along with me, because the way they'll say, well, we need to be able to do all of it because we need. If you want food, don't you? And you want cheap food, we should be able to do all this stuff.
We should be able to go right up to the stream banks. Darn it!
And we should steal all the water if we need it. I mean, that's the kind of short tip of the nose thinking we end up with. And that's what infuriates me. And that's why someone like Ed, who identifies as a Republican, is someone that I go, okay, maybe there's hope. Maybe there's hope in that party that someone will come back to, I'm not saying sanity, but somewhere near it, in the ballpark at least. Maybe the parking lot. I don't know.
We need to start bringing trout out of the streams with cancerous tumors on their lips.
Which, to be honest, going back to as a kid, Lake Erie, the only fish I remember seeing in the lake were floating sideways. And they had like a 6th or 7th eye on them.
Like a thing from The Simpsons?
Exactly. I mean, that's what we saw. I still remember as a 5-year-old. There was one that was floating and it was looking up at me. And it freaked me out. And it's probably the reason I can't stand fish to this day.
Yeah, maybe. And
Scared me to death.
I mean, you also look where we came when it came to protecting some of the birds in this state. We have the cranes coming back. We have the peregrine falcons coming back, red-tailed hawk. Like all that because we protect the water sources. It's amazing how that thing works.
So if we get rid of the water, all those birds will go away?
Probably.
Good. Let's get rid of the water.
Get
Get rid of the water. We can just buy it from Nestle. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
I'll never bend. I'm with you now until the end.
Thought-provoking, intelligent conversation with a heart. The voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
I'm still not sure of all the causes and all the science.
Ohio Governor John Kasich jumps into the 2016 race. We'll try to decipher his position on climate change.
One of the things that preceded the failure of the nation-state of Syria and the rise of ISIS was the effect of climate change.
The Democratic presidential candidate Martin O'Malley links global warming to Middle East unrest and ISIS.
If he is saying that, then my use of aerosol hairspray is as bad as beheadings.
And Fox News heads explode. Plus,
right in the middle of this problem, we have fierce opposition and blind inertia.
California Governor Jerry Brown slams climate science deniers.
All of those slams and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comments.
Of course, we've got to be concerned about it, but we shouldn't worship the environment.
No, we should worship a great big, huge, invisible, bearded, floating guy in the sky. Like you, Governor. That makes much more sense. Am I right? This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I suspect you may be breathing a sigh of relief. We have maybe, just maybe, the final major presidential candidate to enter the race this week, which means your yeoman's job of tracking each of their climate change positions over these past many months is almost over.
There are probably a few more that are going to pop up anyway. They're like whack-a-mole.
All right, well, you just keep whacking. What do you have for us today?
Well, first, the 16th Republican has now jumped into the race for the 2016 Republican presidential nomination. Ohio Governor John Kasich announced his bid on Tuesday. Now, as we've said, we've been tracking the climate change positions of all of the official 2016 candidates, and in an interview with the Financial Times just 2 weeks ago, Kasich said he believes climate change is happening, but he's not sure it's time to do anything about it.
We have an obligation to the environment. Of course, we've got to be concerned about it, but we shouldn't worship the environment. And I wouldn't want to create any kind of dramatic economic change of policy, because I'm still not sure, I don't know that anybody is fully sure of all the causes and all the science.
Oh, man. All right, let's unpack that. First, nobody's worshiping the environment. What we're trying to say is, let's keep the planet alive. That's all it is. And the idea that, yeah, we may have to spend a lot of money to save ourselves, given that we have spent so much more money essentially killing ourselves over the past 50, 100 years. And yes, people do know who is responsible. It is man.
And in more recent history, in practice as governor, Kasich rejected federal funding for high-speed rail and rolled back Ohio's wildly successful renewable electricity standard, which had saved Ohioans over $200 million and lowered their electricity rates.
So is it fair to say that John Kasich both pretends to not be a denier and pretends to be a denier?
All at the same time. It's quite a trick.
He's very good.
Right-wing media was in an uproar this week after Democratic presidential candidate and former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley linked historic mega-drought in the Middle East to unrest in the region.
One of the things that preceded the failure of the nation-state of Syria and the rise of ISIS was the effect of climate change and the mega-drought that affected that region, wiped out farmers, drove people to cities, created a humanitarian crisis. It created the conditions of extreme poverty that has led now to the rise of ISIL and this extreme violence.
Heads exploded in right-wing media land, figuratively, of course. Here's Fox News host Kennedy.
Oh, that's it. It's the mega drought. Finally, we know. I guess when you mix a rise in temperature with a lack of water, you get an Islamic caliphate.
Of course, don't tell Fox News, but the Pentagon calls global warming a threat multiplier, and multiple studies have found climate change worsened the 2011 drought in Syria and played a role in triggering Syria's civil war.
And we have covered that time and time again on the Green News Report. So I guess they just can't be bothered to do actual research over at Fox News.
Meanwhile, California Governor Jerry Brown blasted the climate change denial industry and their friends in politics and the media for obstructing action on climate change at a two-day climate summit at the Vatican in Rome this week.
We are talking about extinction. We're talking about climate regimes that have not been seen for tens of millions of years, that requires that we react. Right in the middle of this problem, we have fierce opposition and blind inertia. And that opposition is well financed.
And former California governor and action movie star Arnold Schwarzenegger also warned the conference, quote, "I've starred in a lot of science fiction movies, and let me tell you something, climate change is not science fiction."
And that's the guy who used to drive his Hummer around proudly as a denier. People can change. Only question is, will they do it before it's too late? For much more on that story and all of the others we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget, you can download the Green News Report anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes from bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
Well, my email box hath flooded over with crazy right-wing conspiracies that Obama is going to overturn the Constitution and that he's going to run for a third term so that he can be king. You know that you've heard this, right? You've heard that Obama's going to run for a third term. Evidently, while he was in Kenya, he said that he's actually he thinks he's actually doing a pretty good job. Actually, a pretty good president, according to him. He said I think if I ran, I could win, but I can't. The law is the law. He did recognize that, but a lot of things that come from the right wing, they only read half the sentence, kind of like the Second Amendment. They only read half of it, and the half of it is the outrage part. Are you going to run again? Which the Tea Party, little heart palpitations there. Just kind of makes you laugh. Anyway, let's find out what's going on in Washington, D.C. and around the world. Bob Ney, Talk Radio News Service. Bob, what do you think? Third term?
Well, I read those things about how he's got the militia organized and things. I have one thing to say about it. Michelle Obama wouldn't let him have a third term if he begged or something. That's out the window.
Yeah, you're probably right. But
it should be like, you want to do what? No.
No. It's time to play golf. It's time to live off our laurels and give speeches and have a foundation and do all that stuff. But it's interesting. My inbox immediately, a whole bunch of stuff of from the GOP USA, GOP this. They're all going, see, he wants to be king. It's nuts.
I read some of those things though, and then I see some of them posted on Facebook, and I'm sitting here thinking, really? I mean, does anybody really? I saw some of the things about Bush the same way. You want to do this and that, and I'm like, where do these people come up with this stuff?
Yeah, look, he's going to invade Texas and take over Texas. Let me let you in a little secret. Texas is part of the U.S. He doesn't have to take it over.
That's right.
I mean, am I the only one who thinks that way? I mean, it's really kind of freaky that you've got these people going, I can't wait to kill me some of them libtards. You mean the U.S. military?
Yeah, good point.
Just nuts. But I guess, the way our political discourse has been over the last several years, not really surprising. And I look at the Republican field for president. I mean, I'm really not surprised Donald Trump is at the front of the pack.
Well, Trump's saying some things, but the president swung back while he was in, I think it was in Kenya, at Republican candidates, and normally the president of the opposite party doesn't weigh in whatsoever on candidates, in a primary like the Republican candidates, but frankly, I mean, the statements made, the oven statement by Huckabee, I can't even call that over the top. And then they called Kerry Pontius Pilate, that was Cotton. And then Ted Cruz, the statement that Obama was the biggest sponsor of state terrorism. And you see that. And some people have said to me, well, the president demeans himself, to go to that level. But I think sometimes, the president didn't answer back and call them names. But,
right.
I think sometimes you just have to respond to some things.
So I gotta wonder what when you say that Obama's the largest sponsor of state terrorism, I gotta wonder who your constituency are, because I would imagine that Al Qaeda truly believes Obama is the largest sponsor of state terrorism because they're getting bombed.
Yes, but Cruz, I think this Huckabee comment was pure and simple. Advisors saying you got to do a Trump, you got to do a Trump.
Yep.
And and they're insignificant in this process, honestly. Huckabee, Cruz. Cruz is standing on the floor calling the Republican leader a liar, point blank, a liar. This is. I served there. I served there during the Clinton Gingrich years. And I was asked this question on another radio show today. Even during private meetings, I never heard such language. Seriously. This bad during private meetings of Republicans when they could say all kinds of things.
Yeah. Let me ask you this,
Not
Bob.
This bad.
Do you think it's we've diminished the institutions so badly that even the actors within it have no respect for it?
Yeah, I think that a lot of the civility factor is gone. I think it frustrates some of the people that have been there a while. This is and there's always been problems in Congress, but this is a rather new phenomena that's fairly becoming widespread. And it just, I can go back to concrete examples. Steny Hoyer, the number 2 Democratic member of the House right now, came to me, and we got with Senator Dodd and Senator McConnell, and we did an act that could have been the most explosive piece of legislation in modern times, the Help America Vote Act. And we did it, and we took a huge vote margin. I mean, huge. It was civil rights groups liked it. Jimmy Carter and Gerald Ford hailed the bill. And the reason I mention that, Rick, is because it took trust, and it really it took a lot of biting of the tongue, and civility for everybody involved, both sides. I don't think you could do a bill like that today. And it's not because of me and Steny. I've got to give Steny credit, but I just don't think you could. You couldn't do that today.
Well,
it would be impossible. The name calling would stop it right away.
Yeah, I wonder if we can do a lot of the things that made this country great. The space program, the race to the moon, polio, you name the things that we've done. I don't know that today, given the way institutions have been destroyed and demeaned and diminished, I just don't know that any of that stuff can be done today, and that really scares me.
I mean, Huckabee's oven comment is, it's just beyond anything. And Jeb Bush, did come out against it as Hillary Clinton did, the two of them. But this should even, when somebody gets to that level, it should even, they should just write him off, period. And I don't know. Very frustrating.
I got to be honest. I've gotten to the point to where, and maybe it's just because I've become a little jaded by the whole process, that I wasn't shocked or outraged or surprised by his comment. It's a comment of desperation. It's a comment of, hey, let's try and stir something up to get somebody's attention. And I got to be honest, I don't know that there's any depths too low for any of these folks at this point.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then I listened to him, and then I watched John McCain make an idiotic statement, by the way. Of course, I have to start. He's a war hero. Then he made the idiotic statement. You have to do that with McCain. And I watched, Huckabee today said, well, I don't know what this uproar is because, the ambassador from Israel to America didn't like this. The Jewish advocacy groups didn't like this. And Huckabee said, well, I had some Jewish people I just spoke, and they liked it in the audience. Oh, what an answer.
Yeah.
He had a couple people. I'm sure there's a couple people that maybe liked it. And then John McCain was on TV, and they asked him about the Trump comment, and they said, well, you called your constituents crazy. And he said, oh, I was joking. And I'm listening to these people. I'm like, what planet did you come from?
Yeah, it's on one hand, it's interesting to watch. It's funny. It's all of those things. But the other hand, really very sad.
Oh, I think it is. It's in the segueing into the news, the highway bill. If I've ever had to look at something, this is the most uncalled for piece of legislation probably in the last decade or so. They're making 90-day highway bills, and this is the Senate at least did 6 years, which you're supposed to do, and the House won't do it. Boehner won't do it, and then Boehner made the comment, Speaker Boehner, well, we gotta move a bill. We gotta get past all this stuff. Well, quit doing 90-day bills, Mr. Speaker.
And that's what's been curious to me.
There is no call for that. They're destroying the American highway system.
Oh, I know.
They really are.
Oh, I know. And the sad reality is we've been talking about this for about a decade now. At least the last 4 or 5 years, really heavily, where things haven't gotten done, and it's just getting progressively worse. Earlier we talked about kicking the can down the road, and eventually the road's going to be so filled with potholes you can't kick it any farther.
Yes, this is. I was on the Transportation Committee. I sat through 2 highway bills, one in 1995 and the other 6 years later. You do the bills, you fund the highways. The highway departments can do planning. Road systems better than anyone, and you cannot do planning this way. It is virtually impossible.
So what's it going to take? I've talked to a number of Republicans who said, look, this used to be a no-brainer, and now it's turned into this political football. How do things change, or do they?
Well, I believe that Republican governors, because they know what's going on, and they know their states are going to be in trouble, I think Republican governors have to come out swinging. and put aside, any problems they have with going after their own, and come out swinging on this thing, because states are going to be hurt, and it is the leadership of the Republican side that's holding this up.
Yeah, it's just
pure and simple.
Just nuts to me.
It never used to be this way. I like I said, I lived through 2 highway bills. You want to talk about holding hands and singing Kumbaya? I mean, everybody went home happy.
Oh, it's kind of like you. I remember you saying on the program a while ago that the raising the debt ceiling was a yawn vote. I would assume this would be kind of the same thing, but more of a yawn, because this is where you get to bring home some bacon, fix your roads and bridges, and fill the potholes in that your constituents want.
Right. The only people that got angry is somebody that maybe didn't get a project they wanted, and it's returning of the dollars back to the areas, and it's. We have an increasing population, and when you have an increasing population, you have an increasing road need. You have bridges that get washed out. You have, all kinds of aging property in an infrastructure.
Interesting. It just boggles the mind. Anything else going on in the city there?
Well, no, that's about it. I mean, there's a lot of other things, but basically that they're going home 2 days and they're gone.
So does this happen then? Because what happens if nothing gets done before they leave for vacation? Does the Highway Trust Fund just go empty, bust?
Oh, it does. Midnight Friday, everything's going to come to a halt in this country.
So everything. Where they're fixing the roads where I drive every day, they're not going to be there come Monday?
There will be no money. The money will stop. So they have to do something. They have to.
Nice.
Midnight Friday would be D-Day, and they don't want that to happen.
Well, I mean,
we home in the summer.
We had the Republican legislature here in Harrisburg up and leave without a budget. It wouldn't surprise me if the Republicans in Washington did the same.
You never know.
Never know. Bob, great talking with you, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Bob Ney, Talk Radio News Service. Quick break. Right back while we still can, while the infrastructure's there. Back after this.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
While our presidents praise America's magnificent national park system, they're not maintaining them. Bill Clinton, for example, spoke of how lucky he was to have Hot Springs National Park as a childhood playground. Yet he sat idle as that park's natural wonders and facilities deteriorated, and as the Park Service's maintenance backlog soared to $5 billion. Likewise, in his 2000 campaign, a khaki-clad George W. posed in the majestic Cascade Mountain Range. Wailing that parks were, quote, at the breaking point, he vowed to eliminate Clinton's backlog. Instead, he slashed the NPS budget, including a 40% cut for repairs of the very park he had used as a political prop. The maintenance backlog ballooned to nearly $9 billion under his presidency. Ranger George did make one fix, however, a PR fix. Bush operatives instructed park superintendents to make budget cuts, but not to call them cuts. Instead, they were to say that our parks were undergoing, quote, service level adjustments. Under Obama, who speaks movingly of a childhood Greyhound bus trip with his family to see some of our parks, another 12% has been chopped from the NPS budget, bumping the deferred maintenance bill to a staggering $11.5 billion. To his credit, Obama has proposed a 2016 centennial budget for NPS, mitigating years of destructive underfunding and calling for $1 billion to address the backlog. Good for him, but that still leaves a $10 billion shortfall, and the sour duo of Senator Mitch McConnell and Speaker John Boehner will oppose even that little increase for the maintenance of these invaluable public assets. This is Jim Hightower saying our so-called leaders are literally stripping service out of the National Park Service and assuring that our national treasures will fall into acute disrepair. It's a bipartisan disgrace.
What do the corporate powers from Wall Street to Walmart have in common? They hate the Hightower Lowdown. You can see why at www.hightowerlowdown.org.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. The Obama administration is walking a tightrope as it seeks to deepen diplomatic engagement around the world while maintaining pressure on human rights issues. We begin in Kenya, where gay marriage isn't just illegal, but simply being gay could land you 14 years in prison. At a press conference there over the weekend, President Obama had this exchange with Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta.
When you start treating people differently, not because of any harm they're doing anybody, but because they're different, that's the path whereby freedoms begin to erode. And bad things happen.
Kenyatta was defiant.
It's very difficult for us to be able to impose on people that which they themselves do not accept. This is why I repeatedly say that for Kenyans today, the issue of gay rights is really a non-issue.
And re-engagement with Cuba has entailed more than issuing friendly statements in Washington, but removing such designations as Cuba's spot on the state sponsors of terrorism list. Today, the State Department also upgraded Cuba's status on its 2015 Trafficking in Persons report. In other words, Cuba is trying to improve things, but still falls short of minimum standards. Malaysia also received an upgrade, but skeptical journalists note the country is involved in sensitive Trans-Pacific Partnership talks with the U.S., and maybe shouldn't have been given a boost. In May, dozens of mass graves were found along Malaysia's border with Thailand, reportedly part of a long human trafficking route from Myanmar. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
Don't you know, we're talking about a revolution sounds. Don't you know?
Together, we can make America better. The Rick Smith Show. Progressive talk with a conscience.
While they're standing in the welfare lines, crying at the doorsteps of those armies of salvation, wasting time in the unemployment lines, sitting around waiting for a promotion.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Interesting news coming out of Connecticut. Checking my Twitter feed, and it looks like the governor of Connecticut, Dan Malloy, it looks like he has signed a piece of legislation that would put labor education in the classroom. And it looks like they've signed on to this idea that maybe we should give people a well-rounded bit of education with a little history in the background. What do you think about that? Is that a good thing, bad thing? I know the right wing's probably losing their minds that there's a potential that people may learn about the past, but I got to be honest, I actually think it's a good thing that we have some basis of knowledge of knowing where child labor laws came from, some basis of knowledge of where the minimum wage, where the maximum hour laws come from, some bit of knowledge of working conditions of the past. And I've talked about this before. One of the things I wanted to do a couple of years back that the school district not happy, not willing, not interested in pursuing was kind of an essay contest for 8th graders, and we would have set up some kind of a funding thing, a treasury bond or something, couple $100, $1,000, something like that. But just for 8th graders to write an essay going, 100 years ago, this is what my life would be like. Just the realization of, just 100 years ago, what would your life have been? Would you have, summers off? Would you be able to do the thumb thing 24/7? Would you be able to lounge around in air conditioning? What would conditions be like? And it was met with overwhelming resistance. And of course, my theory on it was, then you learn about the history of labor and how those things changed. And for me, it came out of, a trip I had taken up to the coal mines up north in the Scranton area, where the fatality rates of 6 and 7 and 8-year-old children were as high as 50%. Think about that for a second. Where, the job that they had opening and closing the door, the kids who were working that door, 50% of them didn't move on to the next job. Very, very scary, scary stuff. And there are those who want to take us back to those kind of days. And I think by learning the history, by understanding where we came from, probably an important little bit about not allowing it to happen again. Just kind of a thought. And the other part of it is, you go to Scott Walker's, Wisconsin, which I understand he cut in front of somebody in line at the cheesesteak place in Philadelphia to get his cheesesteaks from each place. Couldn't wait in line for both places. But you go back to that uprising, it was because of the labor education. And I think we should be starting something here in Pennsylvania as well to try and get some labor education in our classrooms. Just kind of a thought. Anyway, if you missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go for the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Have a great night. Thanks for being here. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show.